I'm a rebel. I'm a
Right.
I'm a rule breaker. You can't control me, Mr. Man.
Dude, you're so dangerous. How'd you get so
And
dangerous, Mark?
something I started wearing a leather jacket the other day, so
Mm,
that's where no, I don't have a
yeah.
leather jacket, but it'd be really
But
cool
you're
to
gonna
have
get
one.
one.
Hello, hello, hello. Watch this, ready? Whoa, whoa, whoa. It's almost Halloween. And it's the first of a double feature. Spooky. Spooky. I see our guest is already here. I'm going to let them in a second. But I'm going to relay a couple of things. One, first of all, our guest tonight, Micah Player, is going to be joining us in a second. I must say, thank you very much for, how do I put this? For putting up, as well as last week's guest, who we're postponing for a little bit as well, with my sickness. I got a cold. Obviously, I'm sounding better, but I got a cold that was a nightmare. And I'll tell you probably a little bit more about it later tonight. But the short end of it was tonsils stuff. But the weird part of it is I hiccuped for 2 days straight. 2 days straight. Every waking hour. When I fell asleep, I didn't hiccup. But hiccup for 2 days straight. It was wild. I've never had that happen before. But we are on the mend. We are ready to go. I'm excited. I have energy, the best I can do. So our guest tonight is the one, the only Micah Player. Recent books, including Itty Bitty, no, I can't even say it. Itty Bitty Betty Blop. There we go. I got it. By Constance Lombardo. We have stuff like Vote for a Future, Guy stuff, Tarot Man. We got a bunch of Micah's books that are sort of in-house. They're all amazing and beautiful. And let me open these up so you can see all the loveliness that's inside. And we're going to be drawing tonight. Massive hiccups are the worst. After surgery, they're bad. I don't know what it was. I've never had that, but I was just, and it wasn't bad. It wasn't like, but it was just little ones. And it was just, it was problematic. Oh, whatever. So let me let in our guest and we'll get going for the night. Again, I have a double decker, which means tomorrow night I'm doing another one of these. 2 in a row. I'll probably be hoarse by the end of it and all that fun stuff. So here we go. Let me let our guest in. Let me boop, search, invite to join. Oh, you're right there. Beautiful. I'm hitting invite. I'm not stalling out. I'm waiting. You got this. What? What was it? Hey, we got to see this weird abstract shot for a second.
That was the wall. That was the other. That was the camera was going the other direction. Welcome.
It was a beautiful wall.
You know what? You got to be prepared in this life for any situation, and that wall was ready. It was ready in that moment.
It was its 15 minutes of fame. It's been dying for a long time. Well,
it's like, come on, man.
Yeah, I've been sitting in this house for this long.
Mm-hmm.
How are you?
I'm good, man, and I'm so glad that you're feeling better, dude. Like, there's nothing worse than that. Like, we messaged back and forth about this a little bit, but like that one cold that like hits you in the fall, that's just like feel like you're gonna die, and then finally that moment happens where like your nose actually clears up for like when you feel that. That's a wonderful feeling. When you feel that you blow it all out and you're ready to go. Are you there?
We're I think so. I never actually got like. For anybody that's grossed out by this, I never got the stuff. It was all tonsils. And the night, or no, it wasn't. The first night was like Tuesday. I was exhausted. I slept for hours and hours, and then I was fine. And then the tonsils came back, and they gave me a steroid the day of. Okay. So I was still feeling awful, but they gave me a steroid, but I didn't sleep that night.
Yeah. That sounds like stress. almost, and it wasn't strep, huh?
Nope.
But it felt like
that wasn't COVID. It was just a bad cold. There's walking pneumonia going around in our area too, which is lovely. And so who knows what it was, but I survived and I made it to the other side. Luckily, I didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. My wife approached that tunnel for a second too, and then has turned the other direction, so she's getting better too.
Good.
But it was a rough couple days. But I must say thank you for postponing and being able to do it on another night, because we've been meaning to have you on for a while. We've been fans of yours for ages. And it was a bummer. I always feel so guilty because we had arranged it like months in advance, and then all of a sudden it's like one stupid thing gets in the way. So we will thank you. For those that don't know you, can you relay real quickly who you are and what you do?
Yeah, my name is Micah Player, and I'm an author and an illustrator. I started off as a graphic designer. My early sort of career was all graphic design, and that's what I studied in school. But you know, it was kind of like it was because it was something you could do as a job, right? Like, oh, I'm going to be a graphic designer. Like, it sounded like professional sounding. But I think I always really wanted to do kids books, and eventually it worked out to be able to do it, and it's been amazing. I think my first picture book came out in 2012, I think, was my first picture book, and I've been working ever since, and it's just a blast. For the last several years, I've been mostly illustrating, and then this coming year, I have a couple of books coming out. The first one is called This Is a Moment, comes out in April, and I'm really excited to kind of get back to doing some. I feel like I do most of my writing like on like social media. Like, I'll just kind of like write stuff and like doodle for social media. But like it's been really fun to get ready to launch a book. But in the meantime, Itty Bitty Betty Blob this year has been super fun, and huge blast to work with Constance Lombardo. And so I make picture books for kids. That's what I do. That's my job.
Cool. I was going to ask you actually about like your Instagram feed has a lot of like really great quotes and things sort of that you sort of illustrate and hand letter and do all this fun stuff with. And I'm wondering, have you gotten approached of any sort about that kind of like, could you do like not necessarily happy-go-lucky, but sort of like a inspirational work?
Yes. In fact, so that's happened a couple of times, right? So like Vote for Our Future actually was the result of that. So like I had done like a drawing ahead of an election, and Lee Wade saw the art on Instagram and was like, oh my gosh, this would be such a cool book to do, a book about voting for the future because kids have to live there, was the kind of basic idea. And then so she kind of put that together as a project and brought on an author to like write it, but it was really fun. So it's interesting how social media, especially Instagram, can kind of do that. Like, things kind of come together because we're all on there and we're all sort of like watching each other. And then This Is a Moment is very specifically kind of like a long form version of one of those kind of posts where I use Instagram to just kind of like think things through, put stuff out there, and kind of really just sort of not feel lonely, because I feel like what we do for a living can sometimes be really insular, right? Like, we're kind of like away from everything else, and we're working in this little room and
the basement.
Yeah, exactly, right. And so like it's kind of like this feeling sometimes of like, I just need to know that other people are out there, and so that's kind of what I always feel like Instagram is for me. And so I had an editor that Laurie Hornick, who I love, who offered a chance to kind of do something. She's like, what would you kind of want to do if you do a longer format kind of version of something like that? And so that's what This Is a Moment is. It's kind of like just a thought about how, a lot of us, we get like when we start getting close to like a big moment, like especially like I felt like when I was getting close to graduation, or when I was getting close to like entering like my career or whatever, right? There's all these, and I still feel this. I get that feeling that like everything cool that's ever going to happen has already been done, right? Yeah. So everyone's already did all the cool stuff, and so why does anyone need anything from me? And I think it's a really natural feeling for like artists to get. And so the book isn't specifically just for artists, but it's kind of like that sentiment, just that like whatever, like your life is happening in this particular spot. And so like whatever you do, it's going to be the right thing for now, because this has never existed before, and you're part of it in a way that like your parents aren't, right? Like you're sort of part of your time that you're alive is like your habitat, right? And so you're ready for it. And so that's kind of the basic idea of the book, was something for my kids, just kind of like give them, I don't know, like basically it's like a pep talk that I'm giving to myself in the mirror, but then like remembering that like my kids need that, I need it from my parents, and that's kind of
it sounds sort of like almost a love letter to yourself in a way, like or
yeah,
not necessarily like, obviously it's for other people, but it's like sort of you being self-reflective of sort of the situation that you're in and how do you express that. Okay, so I have to go back and ask this one question, because I heard this and I'm not sure I heard what I heard. So with Vote for Our Future, the idea for the book came about because you had drawings and they wanted you to draw it, but they went and found an author to write it after the fact?
Yeah, it was interesting because Margaret McNamara, it was also a friend of Lee Wade, and it was kind of like this would be the perfect combination of people, right? Like to do this thing. And so it was really fun, because it was kind of like it was a sentiment, but then the author made it more of a book about action, right? Because I think my headspace was just like, oh, I'm just going to do like a book about like how important it is to vote, so that kids can, to think about kids when we vote. That was kind of like the thought process for the post. But the author who kind of came on was much more focused on like the action that kids can take. Kids don't have to be passive, right? Like kids can participate in the election by getting out there and making sure other people vote. And it was a really cool approach and ended up being fun. But yeah, like it happened because of an idea that was kind of put out onto an Instagram.
I've never heard it be that direction. I've always heard it be the author and then to the illustrator, not the other way around, which kind of...
No, right? Like, and I've never had anything else like that happen ever, right? So it was really interesting. It was really fun.
So tonight we are going to be drawing and making and things of the sort. But I have my little preface that I always state, and I'm adding another thing to it, which is, should the internet go down of any sort, or Instagram go down, I will try to get back on as fast as possible. Same thing for you. You need to log out, log back in. We'll manage that. Just every once in a while it occurs. But the normal stuff that I ask is, one, what materials are you going to use tonight?
Okay. I like almost all my work is digital, almost all of it. Okay. So I was like, oh my gosh, I need something to doodle. So I like dug through a drawer and I found an old piece of watercolor paper, the back of something. And then, so that is going to be, that material is called random backside of an old piece of watercolor paper. And then I grabbed a couple of Prismacolor pencils, and I grabbed this like little like burnt umber. I guess it's a Daler Rowney like sepia kind of ink, and those are my materials. I also have, I believe it's a Grumbacher, number 1.
Fancy. What would you say? Colored pencil? What did you say was the second thing? Something.
Oh, so Prismacolors.
Prismacolors. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I grabbed like a terracotta Prismacolor. There you
go. Gotcha. So the other question is, what are you drawing or making tonight?
Okay. Well, I started off by like, I guess I should say, I put some acrylic, like I just kind of did some acrylic yellow kind of like shapes. And I'm going to either turn this into a forest full of a lot of like little kids running around, or I'm going to make it into a bunch of faces. So one or the other. Those are the two things I'm going to do.
You'll figure it out along the way.
We'll go along. What about you? What are you going to do?
I don't know yet. I'm still struggling. I have come across an idea for a book the other day that when I got that steroid for the tonsils or whatever, I was up, I didn't sleep that night, and I stayed up all night and I started writing a book idea.
Rad.
Then I did some artwork for it the other day, and I really liked the direction, and I'm trying to like, not necessarily see if I can replicate it, but play around with the aesthetic. So it's really, all I have is like idea of materials, but I don't have an idea of what I want to do with it.
Like you know what you want it to feel like where you kind of want it's just like.
This is what I have so far, which is a skeleton with a little boy inside the ribs. I don't know what that means of any sort. I don't know why. But I was trying to think like Halloween.
Yes.
Something or other. But at the same time, I also feel like, I don't know if I want to do a proper Halloween or I just want to do something a little spooky or something. But one of the things I got my hands on, and this is going to sound real high tech here. I got my hands on some bright sheets of paper. Woo!
Nice.
Fancy.
Love it.
Love it. Incorporate some like punchy color. One of my let's see. Someone says my mic is. It shouldn't be. Maybe I'll speak up a little bit more. It says that maybe a little quiet.
Like I almost died 2 days ago. Yeah, I'm sorry that my projection.
Yeah. This is the best it gets. But one of the things I talked to a publisher on a new book that I'm going to work on, and we were talking about doing instead of CMYK, doing CRYK for the book.
Oh wow!
Yeah, okay. Which I found out about a couple of weekends ago, and I'm like, this is what I want to do.
Wait, so red instead of magenta?
It's rhodindium or something like that.
What?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know anything about this.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Do you know the artist Melissa Sweet?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I asked her the other day. We were at an event. She was there, and I was asking about like because I really like the colors that she gets.
Yes.
And I was like, "Are you printing a fifth color? What's going on here?" And she goes, "No, I just do CRYK." I'm like, "What? What?" And it's instead of doing magenta, which is that sort of deep dark red, and then mixing it to get all your your lighter reds and whatnot. It's instead using something. I think it's called rhodindium. I could be wrong on that. But the idea is that it is a brighter, like almost fluorescent red. And so all your colors lift up and become brighter because of it. And I was like, I'm excited. Amazing. And so it's still a 4-color process, so it shouldn't really cost anymore. And some printers have done it. And the publisher that I'm working with, I mentioned it, and they said they've done it in the past. I'm like, yes. And so I was like, if I can achieve a fluorescent color without having to do the 5th color, then I'm like, okay, that's something to play with. So that's why I got these colors.
I wonder if it's better at oranges, right? Because that's always like the sort of like
I bet you it is.
Death of CMYK is orange, right?
I bet you it is.
Well, dude, that sounds awesome. I can't wait.
Better than that. I mean, I asked the publisher and they said it shouldn't cost anymore. Now, whether the project goes towards that, I want to play with sort of like how punchy can I get with some of the colors, and so that's basically so far all I got. And so like if it's a skeleton, it may be a weird colored skeleton. Outside of that, last thing I will touch on, and then we should probably draw so people don't go, why is this taking forever? If at any point you need to leave tonight, let me know. I'm not going to hold you to 4 hours if you don't want to go the full stint. It's a matter of just let me know, and we'll sort of do a lovely little sign off. But
you said the full hour, right? Yeah. If I don't want to go the full hour?
Yeah, 10 minutes.
I thought you said 4 hours.
Yeah, 4 hours.
You don't want to go 4 hours.
Yeah. My wife says it's rhodamine. That's what it is. Rhodamine.
Awesome.
So like
Rhodamine.
Rhodamine. That's the color.
Very cool. So, Rhodamine.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm excited to look into this. It sounds amazing. And I'm sure, like with your sort of approach, right? Like your stuff is so kind of like, there's such a, like there's all these layers of color, you know what I mean? That are kind of like washing against each other in these really pretty ways. It's like having all that kind of like amp up by that extra amount will be like so cool to see. I'm really excited.
It's also like, because I mix stuff, it sometimes can get a little dull or a little bit muted. And so like if I start with something that much brighter, I'm like, ooh. So anyways, why don't we switch our downshoots and we can just get going and making, and I guess I will do some fluorescent skeletons for the night, and maybe there'll be a party or something. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
So
but
I feel like I'm gonna blow this sort of like transition. So what do I do? I just kind of like turn things down.
Yeah. So what I do is that's it. You got it. And it's a matter of just making sure that it's right side up for you. So like put your hands in the shot real quick and let's see. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're good.
Okay. I think we're good.
All
right. I'm going to.
And you can, like right now, I'm gonna use my fingers on mine. I can pinch on the screen and get real close. Whoa.
Okay.
Hello. There's my nose. There's my teeth. There's my beard.
Mark,
so
I wonder how many people you have personally taught how to do Instagram Live.
How many people have seen up my nose? That's a better question. So yeah, you can pinch in and out to get the width or whatever you need for your shot, and then you're good to go.
All right, let's do it.
So let's I'm gonna jump back because we had talked a little bit at the beginning, sort of like the history and the designer and all those things. I assume that the type side of things for you comes somewhat from that sort of design background.
Yes. So yeah, I mean I kind of like fell in love with typography in college, right? And it sort of seemed like this like when I went to school, I don't know if we're close to the same age, if I'm a little older than you, but when I was in school, House Industries was like this amazingly cool like type foundry, right? And it's sort of like I was already sort of fascinated with and interested in all the sort of hand lettering that I would see as you started moving back through kind of like early modern stuff, kind of coming out of Bauhaus, the way that like everything was both like modern feeling, but it also had that kind of gooiness and kind of like messiness that came from being made by hand, right? And so that was like my first love, I think, as a design student, was just early modern and Wang Row and like all this kind of like, I don't know, just that when things go from being really when things are clean, but they're made with like sort of like organic lines or whatever. It was what I got really kind of like excited about. But still, I sort of like a lot of my early stuff was very, very. In fact, I'll grab something really fast. This was like the first thing that I ever published was this, the Around the World puzzle. So I did this with Chronicle Books. Yeah. And you see that like the sort of early stuff that I was doing was like very like hard-edged, very kind of like some details on top of like hard-edged stuff. And this is really kind of like the vestiges of like my graphic design sort of like study, right? It's like I love packaging. I love kind of like trying to kind of like have all the different parts of a thing. Like that was, I think, what got me excited about doing graphic design. I thought I was going to do advertising at first, like a lot of kids that study that. But then little by little, I was like, I don't know, I just like making stuff. I'd rather make the thing than try to sell the thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yep. Now, wait. I'm going to go back and we're going to check this real quick because you said age-wise. I'm going to guess we're either the same age or I might actually be older than you.
What? So I was 95, high school, 95.
Oh, you're 1 year ahead of me. Okay, I was 96. Okay, you win. So you went through the same basic time frame. I was for some reason I always assume people think I'm younger than I am. But
wow,
my childish I was gonna say good looks, but it's actually my childish mentality is it comes into play. So let's talk about. I mean, 2012 when you started to say when you first got into books. At first, it scared me because you started to say 2000, and my initial reaction was like, "Oh, please don't tell me it's the pandemic."
No.
But because those days scare me for people that were entering. So 2012, you've been through the ringer time-wise, and you know been around enough in the industry that do you feel? And I'm just sort of jumping into a deep topic here, but I was at a CRYK group last night, and we were talking about sort of the picture book industry and sort of where it's at right now, and you know what we're hearing from agents and other folks. And I'm wondering, sort of compared to when you started, do you think the industry is in a better place? Do you feel like it's struggling? Where just like historically do you feel like we're at?
Dude, Mark, this is such a cool conversation because, and honestly, I could talk about this forever because, and also I honestly think this is one of the things that you have like this kind of amazing gift for is facilitating conversations like this, because this could be, you can talk about 1,000 different things, but I feel like this is something that's really kind of near and dear to so many of us right now. It's just like, there does seem to be a feeling of kind of hesitation or something that's kind of hovering around the industry, if that makes any sense. And I'm not sure where that comes from. I feel really fortunate to have plenty of work currently, but like any illustrator and anybody who does anything for themselves, the sort of like dread is always like, but what happens when I get done with these things I'm doing? It's like, it's like that. There's like, and so I'm booked up for a little while, and I feel good about that. I feel really fortunate, but I cannot help but feel kind of like this sense of like, but what is next? You know what I mean? And I think that for some reason, I feel like that's I get the sense it's a pervasive feeling right now. And I can't tell whether it's because the industry is actually different than it has been in the past, or if we've come through such a traumatic period of time that our heads are kind of rattled, and that's how it's expressing itself. Does that make any sense?
No, that makes sense. I mean, just the idea of, I've always assumed, and I think you put a sort of not necessarily a positive spin, but a spin that I haven't really thought about, which is I've been under the assumption the market's sort of just like in a little bit of a funk right now. I always picture any illustration market or any arts as a pendulum, and it swings one way and then it swings back and then it swings the next way, and it keeps going back and forth, and sort of we're in that point where I feel like it's swung the other direction from when I started. But I also think that give it time and it will swing back the other direction, and as if you're willing to sort of like wait it out a little bit. But I think the thing that you're the sort of the stress of making it through something, and maybe we're maybe a little bit more hypersensitive to sort of what's going on, or the expectations around the I don't want to say like the sales, or like I feel like I'm watching more and hearing more and paying attention more honestly to the idea of like who's getting books and who's selling. And I feel like 5 years ago it was sort of like, cool, I'm just making stuff, and I'm not worried about that kind of like getting into that nitty gritty of, and not necessarily that it's a comparison or a jealousy thing, but just like, oh, if so and so doesn't have a book right now, that's a sign of something. And
but don't you think part of that is you're a creative person and your brain is always trying to connect dots? Like you're always trying, like we have to be the worst group of people to deal with anxiety on the planet, right? Because we're always trying to look for patterns, and we're always trying to look for like, what is the what's the reason why this is happening? Like what's the sort of like narrative kind of like arc of things? And like I feel like that's why I kind of get I kind of have to check myself once in a while, because I wonder like, okay, so this has never been like a normal job, right? This has never been something that normal people do. This has never been something that's like a common thing that lots of people are able to like be really successful at. So first of all, the fact that we have, I think there's probably some statistic, right? Like the fact that you and I have like published more than one book, right? Probably already puts us in like some kind of weird magical like category, right? And so we've been kind of like, I feel like I've been really fortunate, right? Like I feel like I've been really lucky that I keep getting to do books, right? And so then your brain starts going like, but what does that luck run out? The other shoe is going to drop. Like that kind of like energy is like, I just feel like it's unavoidable when you're made from the weird toxic substances that created us. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, so yeah, I don't know whether it's a sense of like things are different, or whether we're different, right? Because we're coming up on our 50s, and like all of the all those feelings start happening. Like, because I feel like my eye is like always on like younger younger artists, right?
Yep.
Like I'm always like, oh man, they're cool. Like everything they do is cool, and like how come I can't be cool anymore? You know, like your brain is like you're sick of your own stuff. Like you're sick of like your own work. You're bored with it. You know what I mean? And so there's something about that I think makes somebody built for what we do, because you get tired of one set of things, and so you start sort of like attempting to do things in a different way. You know what I mean? And that keeps you fresh, and you kind of evolve, kind of moving through that. But yeah, like I don't know, man. Like I think that's just me kind of like rambling on. But I've thought about those things a lot, and I kind of like my gut feeling is that yes, COVID impacted all of us a lot, more than we even want to kind of like process. And we're all still in fight or flight mode. We're all still like waiting for the next terrible thing to happen. That's what I think is really.
I mean, looking at when I deal with college kids, obviously, like there's a lot of anxiety and whatnot running through those ranks. And on top of that, you add in stuff like the election, and there's a lot of people on edge at this
People
point.
are worried about the election? I didn't realize.
Yeah, you didn't hear about it?
I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling just like really easy about everything. Everything just seems like it's all just coming in smooth, smooth landing.
No one's going to be up in on Tuesday night like dry heaving from
my gosh.
But it's one of those things where like I am not the midlife crisis person who needs a sports car.
Right.
I don't have any interest in that to somehow like prove my worth or like to look cool of any sort, because naturally gifted.
Cool.
But more so just this idea of like there is that question of like, I've been doing this for so long, am I old now? And that question has popped up a little bit more so for me in the sense that sort of I look at how many students I have now that live on their iPads and can do things on their iPads that I'm like, I just don't know how to do that at this point. And they're so adept at it that I just feel like at this point I'd be playing catch up to try to do some of the things they're doing. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm just the old fogey who's like, I don't want to learn how to, send an email on my phone at this point. And so like, I do think there are those questions that are going through my head.
Right.
I mean, even in the teaching world that I'm in, when I started out, I felt like I was like this young kid who didn't know what I was doing. And now I'm in a group of people at the school who have the like historical knowledge of what has come before.
Wow.
And it's like, I'm like, no, I'm still like that gawky little, 20-year-old who showed up here going, can I teach?
Yeah.
And in reality, it's like, nope, I am the expert at this point, and it feels wrong. And so I think that's where some of those things come from. And I do think that like, looking at the industry, it's the same thing. Like, am I keeping up is one of those questions that pops in my head quite frequently. And makes me like want to change styles and try things and do things. And hopefully I can get past those hurdles. But that was a really hefty topic right off the bat. So let's
well, dude, I don't care. I don't care. People can get bored and be like, oh, I don't want to hear about this, and they can go do whatever else they want to do, because we're going to talk about this shit all night. I think because we're old and we're going to talk about it. No, I think it's interesting, right? Because like, for one thing, like I said, I draw digitally like all the time. Like that's my headspace. It wasn't always that way. I was kind of like really anti, like, not digital art, because I always loved digital, like a component of my art being digital, but the idea of drawing on something like digital, like that to me was like, there was something about it that I didn't like. And for a long time, remember how bad that sucked? Like forever, drawing digitally wasn't very good. You know what I mean? And so it kind of felt like you were always going to sort of like give up something when it came to kind of like like line quality or spontaneity or whatever when you started drawing digitally, because Cintiqs and like Wacom and stuff, it just, something about it just didn't feel like it was there for a long time for, I feel like, for our generation. You know what I mean? And maybe there were people that were like all on it and they were going for it. But I felt like right around when Kyle Webster started making brushes, you know what I mean? Like something about that era started to feel really like interesting to me as far as like a medium, right? Because now there was something like organic and textural about being able to use those tools and jump right on and not have things feel too slick and too digital when you were on the computer.
Yeah.
And so that has saved me so much like scanning and like garbage all over my office and all the things that sort of like were kind of like a big part of my workflow before. It was kind of like scanners and ink and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But what I think is interesting is because that is kind of an illusion, like this idea that like, oh, working digitally now, it's like just as organic as working like with natural materials and traditional materials. So blah, 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 blah. That's not really true. And so it means that like people like you who work so much with traditional like materials, it's like, I feel like there's some, like the whole world is coming back around to something very, very special about actual materials. Doesn't it feel like it? It feels like there's kind of like, it's kind of come back around to where there's a real value in the process of what people do when they're making a book. And that's almost become part of the marketing process. Do you agree?
I've seen a move and heard of quite a few folks that have said, I want to go back to sort of my roots.
Yeah.
And I don't, it's not to say, and I've had a few folks ask me, like students even, like, well, you don't like digital art. Like, no, I don't care what you make it with. I think it's a matter of like the challenge that I always see with material is if you get too caught up in the material itself.
Yes.
And, like the equivalent of last night when I showed something to a couple of people at I can't think of the word, the CRYK group that I'm part of. One of the guys said to me, like, he goes, so how do you do your collage, or how do you make the images? And I said, oh, I just collage them. And he goes, oh, so like, or at first he goes, what kind of brushes are you using? And I'm like, oh, it's not brushes, it's just collage. And he goes, so you just scan stuff in and put, I'm like, no, I collage with paper. And he goes, so you scan papers in? And I'm like, no, this is like and I was like zoomed in, I'm like, there's where you can see glue that stuck the thing down. And it's one of those things where like, it's gotten to a point where people just assume that most materials are one thing or the other. And that's great. Like, I like the idea that we've gotten to this point where like, it doesn't even like, I've always said to my students that the material is not the issue.
Yes.
If you're caught up in the material, then you miss the point. The point is the aesthetic or the approach or the choices that you make with those materials, not necessarily the material itself. And so like that idea of I know that mentally I need to get past the idea of like somehow if I don't keep up with digital or I feel like I'm falling behind. That's my mind saying, hey, pay attention to the material. And it's the wrong idea. Yeah. Let's
I
put
like
it that way.
I like that. Why keep going with that? That's a really interesting thought.
Well, just the idea of like, again, it's my mind and I think probably a lot of artists go through this, and I imagine that you go through this in the same way of you are working so heavily on a regular basis with materials that and crit and look for that kind of stuff that it's hard not to somehow get caught up in that when you're making work of like, would this material be better, or would this brush be a better choice than the other brush? Yes. And in reality, our audience and Kidlit, a bunch of little kids just go, that looks pretty, or you draw faces really well, and they're not going, you know what, I noticed you're using one of Kyle Webster's brushes that I've seen before. And like, they don't care about that stuff. They care about like, is it a good story, or is it fun, or is it something that they can draw? Like those are the decisions or the concerns they have. And so like some of it's just me and artists in general getting too caught up in superficial things.
Maybe so. But we're kind of like elitists by nature, right? Because we have such a narrow kind of like area of interest that like it's pretty natural to start kind of getting. It's like you get dorky about this thing because there's only so many variations on these subjects that you can really find. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like you kind of I don't know. Like I think that's interesting when you like. For me, like when I say I use Kyle's brushes, I use a bunch of different brushes, but like when I do use his stuff, I really only use like there's like maybe 5 brushes total that I use all the time, and it's almost like they've become like I've stolen them, like they're my brushes now. You know what I mean? It's like, and when you think about it, it's kind of like like physical materials in a sense. Like you kind of once you kind of know how something is going to respond, how something's going to act when it gets resized, all that kind of stuff, then it becomes yours. And like you use it to your own devices, right? Yeah. So like, for instance, I use this one brush that's called like, what is it called? It's called damp graphite or something like that. And it's like this very nondescript, probably like kind of basic graphite brush. But I love how it works so well that like I will use it, like I'll blow it up to a really huge size and use it to make what appear to like the reader to be like almost like washy textures. You know what I mean? Yeah. When that's not what it's intended for. It was intended to be like a graphite shader, but I like how it looks when it gets blown out. And so I think that's sort of where a lot of style comes in digital work, right? Is it's kind of like you sort of like find these pieces and then you use them wrong. Yep. And then that becomes kind of like your look. So I think a lot of people will ask me like, what brush do you use for this? What brush do you use for that? I think it's such an interesting point that you brought up, that it's like, well, it's not like because you use that brush, all of a sudden all your problems are solved and like your stuff is gonna have a style. It's like, no, like I'm fucking up in a really particular way with this brush. You know what I mean? Like I suck at using this brush in a very specific way. And so that's why it looks like me, right? And that's, I think, like 90% of style is just the way we do things wrong. Well, that don't you think?
Yeah, no, it's like it's the equivalent of like there is a gouache brush that I have. That I think it is the least gouache looking thing in the world, and to get the textures that I want out of gouache, I'm actually using graphite pencils, and it's sort of breaking, and this goes into that weird like, and I could be wrong, but for everybody, but it goes into this weird like the artist mentality of rule breaking.
Yes.
So like you tell me this is going to be a gouache brush, huh? Well, guess what? This is the brush I'm going to use for brick textures, and then like. This is not gouache of any sort, or this is, I'm going to use this spray paint to do something that I'm going to blow up and manipulate it, and you're never going to guess what this is because I'm a rebel. I'm a rule breaker. You can't control me, Mr. Man.
Dude, you're so dangerous. How'd you get so dangerous, Mark?
Something I started wearing a leather jacket the other day, so that's where I don't have a leather jacket, but it'd be really cool.
But you're going to get one.
Yeah. I'm going to go out to Wilson's Leather in the mall and get me I looked that up the other day. What was the name of that leather store in malls back in the 80s and 90s?
The leather store?
Yeah, Wilson's Leather. It was you could go in and get like leather jackets.
Oh.
You don't remember Wilson's Leather?
I think I probably remember it. Like when I think of malls, like my brain goes to like the arcade. It goes to like obviously hot dog on a stick. It goes to and specifically the lemonade at Hot Dog on a Stick is like a very evocative like memory for me when it comes to malls as a kid. And so it must mean that like you like maybe I just didn't have any money. So like everything I remember from a mall is like whatever was publicly accessible to walk around to. I wouldn't want to go to a store. They might want to buy something.
I did not buy stuff at Wilson's Leather. I just know that it was there. I was not that cool. Oh. I was a Discovery store or what was Natural Wonders.
Yes.
Natural Wonder, that was my store. Oh, you go in there and they'd have cool sculptures of whales, and they'd have like some weird like didgeridoo music playing in the background. Oh, I love that store. Or the museum store. I don't know if you remember the museum store. That was in that same vein.
Yeah, I think I remember the museum store. I remember, and also obviously like Sharper Image around a certain age, right? Like you're kind of like, oh, this is where all the robots are. And actually, like Radio Shack. Radio Shack to me for a long time in my life was like the coolest place in the world. Like if you walk into Radio Shack and there was like all the weird like kind of remote control robots and stuff, like, and then slowly Radio Shack just kind of disappeared, right? Like it's such an odd.
Yeah, I forget, it went out of business or something. Like I forget what the status is of it, and now it's like if you need that weird, like the other night for the costume that we made for me, I needed some wire and some like little bits and pieces. I was going as the Keymaster from Buster, and you know the helmet, and like you just need stuff to go on it, but you can't go anywhere just to get that stuff. Like Radio Shack was the place.
Yes.
You walk in, like, I need something that looks like some sort of metal part, and they go, we have this whole aisle of things that you can use for CD radios. And I'm like, perfect. But you can't find that around anymore, so you have to go and you have to like search Amazon and buy a pack of 20 of them, and get them or whatever it may be. I like how we got on this. We got on this topic of like mall stores. I remember back in the day when Best Buy was like, there was two different stores in Minnesota. One was called Best Buy and one was called like, it may have been Best Buy, the other one as well. That was more like a Kmart or something of the sort.
Really?
And you always had to describe which one you were going to. And it wasn't the store that it is now. I mean, the store that it is now is not the store that it was, honestly, a while ago, just because of streaming and whatnot. I had a student today tell me that he had a CD player for one of his projects that he's working on. He goes, yeah, I can just, plug it into the wall because battery life. And I'm like, wait, what? You can plug a CD into the wall? And he goes, well, it's made to look old. But it's got a USB on it, and you can just charge it that way. And I'm like, that's not a CD player. That's something else. Like you youngin. This is also the kid though, and if he's watching, he just needs to like bear with it. He's also the student the other day who said to me, and I was like, I felt real old when he said this. Like I've heard like, oh, you guys had tapes and things like that. Easy enough, but he goes, I want to have some audio with my work that I'm showing, and I've heard there's a way that you can send out songs, digital songs, and they'll put them on a CD for you. And I was like, you mean a CDRW?
You mean burning
What's that? Yeah. It was, and he said you had to wait months to get it back. I'm like, you just need a CD burner, bud.
I know. And it doesn't come with, you cannot find a computer with a built-in CD burner unless you're making things kind of like custom yourself anymore. It's super weird.
You can buy a portable CD burner for like $15 now.
Really?
Oh yeah. I bought one because when we went over to Ireland, we were going to watch movies and we didn't know if we would be able to stream stuff, certain movies. So we were over there and I was like, I'll just get a little $20, $15, whatever it was, DVD player that is wafer thin and bring it with us. It just plugs into a laptop or whatever. But we have one at home still that's this like tank from the early 2000s where, you buy one of those stacks of like 100 CDRWs. You're like, I'm going to back everything up. And nowadays it's so antiquated, but okay, off of the mall. Unless you want to keep talking mall talk.
No, it's like viewers 0.
Yeah.
We're done.
They got on the mall talk, and that's where we gave up.
Yeah, we're done. We're done. No, well, I don't know, man. Like, yeah, I'm back, I guess, to your book. So you're pitching a new book, and are you? You said you're not really sure what you want the story to be. It's just kind of right now. It's like a vibe that you're interested in a color vibe.
I have the story. I can't really mention it here, but I have a story.
Of course.
And I'm really, really happy with the idea. And what it comes down to is I've been fighting my agent quite a bit, and not in the sense of like we're evil against each other, but more so, I am someone who is a little too wordy.
Okay.
As for someone that hosts a talk show on Instagram and
yeah, you like to
stuff on
talk.
Somehow I'm a little bit wordy. And the problem is when I write picture books, I have to do a lot of editing, and when I do the editing, it also is still wordy. And so she keeps saying like, well, maybe you need to do a little bit of a longer book. Have you ever considered that? And I finally found a book that I think is an amazing, amazing book. It's my favorite book of the year. Let me see if I think I have it down here, and I'll show this book. My wife almost got it for me, and then she passed on it, and she got me some other great books. But this book is stellar. Where is it? It's here somewhere. Give me 1 second. I'm going to find it. And it just sort of hits on the type of tone that I want in a book. And the way that it's structured. Oh, man. Am I going to not find it now that I've said that? Lauren, is it up?
Oh, no.
Not up there? No? You know what book I'm talking about? Oh, it's over here. It's got to be over here. No, maybe not. It's a book called John the Skeleton. And the tone of the book is this amazing sort of like, I don't even know if it's for kids. I don't know 100% who it's for. I'm still looking. The problem is nothing's in alphabetical order. So I'm like looking for, where did I last put the most recent books that we bought? There it is. Found it. Okay. So, the gist of this book, here we go. It's on screen for anybody who wants to see it. It's called John the Skeleton, and it's translated from Estonian.
Oh my
God. And
look
the
how cool
idea of this book is it's about a skeleton that's in a classroom that retires. And he is brought home by an elderly man and his wife and lives with them. And they fix him up, and they like take him with them everywhere. But what I really love about it are these like sort of short chapters.
Yes.
Just a few paragraphs, and then it's, John settles in.
Yes.
John saves the village. And it's really, really beautiful.
All this tonal work with just one little blast of color. I love
just
that.
Spot color. And done. But really well done, and like primarily pencil. But then you find out it's a real story. About an old couple that actually had this, and their grandkids who like would come and visit and play with this skeleton.
Oh my gosh.
And so like I found this book, and I was like, this book, it was on a list of like the most inventive books this year. That was someone at Publishers Weekly, or I forget where it was, 100 Scope Notes. Puts out. And what I loved about it was that sort of like mini short chapter element. And so I realized, like, am I fighting an uphill battle to always try to shorten stuff that I want to write? Or maybe I'm thinking, and of course, this is like me.
Do you play music?
No, I used to, but not anymore. Why?
But I mean, like, were you in bands when you were a kid? So that was like my sort of like, I don't know, other side of my life was always playing music, and my best friends are the people that I've been playing music with since I was a kid, or since I was, a teenager. And it's like whenever like a song is really hard to write and to work out as a band, you know what I mean? It's like sometimes that can mean there's something there, but other times it's like the best songs kind of just like come together. You know what I mean? And it's like, I wonder sometimes if it's similar when it comes to the sort of work that we do. It's like if getting down to that word count is like this nightmarish struggle every time, right? Then maybe there's something lyrical that you've got in you that you just want to be able to not like have to silence it and turn it into this staccato thing. You want to be able to say the thing. You know what I mean? And it's like, and that's what's going to happen, and it's going to be beautiful. It's really exciting.
That's sort of, so like the book that I have allows that, or the idea that I have allows this sort of like chapter and quiet moments. And I think
Yes.
the other thing that comes into play, like if anybody, I mentioned to the group last night, Skull by Clausen.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
like,
Wonderful.
it is a quiet book. And I feel like in a picture book, and as much as I love picture books, and I mean, I'm still doing them, but the idea of a picture book is sort of short and sweet, in and out. You don't have a lot of real estate to be able to play those moments where you need a whisper, and you kind of have to shout on every page. And I like that idea of like looking at certain books. Could you get away? Like one of the chapters that I have written and is like most of the chapters are, a few paragraphs or like a page or two of text. And then one chapter is literally one sentence.
I love it.
The way I envision it, it is 3 spreads for one sentence.
Yes. Oh,
and like you can't do that in a picture book. And so
you indulgent bitch. Yeah. Look at you. 3 spreads.
My agent might just go, "This is the dumbest thing ever. Why would you ever consider doing this?"
Which is why it's going to be awesome, right? Because I kind of feel like you can never predict the thing that's going to be special. You just can't, right? So it's like, and I feel like we talk ourselves out of. I don't know if this. I don't want to like lump you in to like my own kind of neuroses, but you gave me some of your neuroses, so I'll throw in some of my neuroses. Like what I always kind of like feel like the stuff that comes naturally. It's almost like there's this kind of like predisposition to reject the things that come most naturally. And I don't know whether that comes from having sort of a little bit of a religious upbringing, because I was raised really religious. And so that even though I'm not religious now, there's this echo in it, right? This echo in me that's like, whatever comes naturally to you is probably bad, right? Is this kind of like thing. And so like when I find myself kind of like feeling really pulled to do something, it's almost like there's this guilt or something that sets in. It's like, oh, you need to be more like you got to do things the right way or whatever, right? So it's like the opposite of, like you said, you have this like rebellious tendency. I feel like I have this kind of like rule, kind of like I want to understand what the rules are, right? Like I want to know what they're supposed to be. But I don't think that's a natural state. I think my natural state is much more of a sort of like rule rejector.
Yeah.
But it's like I have this version of myself that was carefully cultivated in Sunday school for a very long time that's like, there's a better way to do it. Like there's got to be the right way to do it. You know what I mean? Like time to do it right. And that's the version of me that really gets in the way, right? Like really gets in the way, because I will find like the worst feeling is when you have this like idea that you're so, and we've all been there, you have this idea that just like keeps you like interested and sort of like engaged for years and years and years, and you're like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do that idea. But then somehow you find other things to do instead that are more pressing, and you take other jobs, and you kind of go, well, there'll always be time to do that one. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then something so much like that thing comes out. You know what I mean? And you're like, what? like there's this kind of like weird kind of feeling. And again, like this is something you have to fight all the time, because chances are you could probably still do the thing and it would be different enough because it was coming through your perspective that you don't have to abandon things just because something is similar, right?
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? It's like that feeling of like sometimes you really just got to hand it to people that pull the trigger. They pull the trigger on something that you marinated on for 5 years. You know what I mean? Instead, they're like, oh, I did it, and then I did it, and now it's out. You know what I mean? And I don't know where that comes from with me, but it's sort of like this like tendency to kind of like overthink and over kind of like almost like I gotta be real sure about this one, blah 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 blah, and then it's like it's too late.
Not worth it.
Yeah, that's not the right way to work. I mean maybe it's just the reality of how my brain works.
The penny book that I did, the series, the penny book itself. The reason why I got that job was because they saw on my Instagram feed I had drawn a penny as a character, character, and he had a little button friend that, you know, they lived together in a someone's pocket or whatever.
Yes.
And the story of it was about a penny finding out that he's not worth much. And he goes on an adventure and finds out that he's a lucky penny. Well,
Nice.
Guess what? They came to me and said, hey, we got this story about a penny that doesn't think he's worth very much and finds out he's a lucky penny.
Yeah.
We saw your penny drawing on your Instagram. Would you like to illustrate this? And I'm like, yeah, because I kind of already wrote, or I was starting to write that, and I just didn't finish it. Yeah. And Kimberly Wilson, who is, you know, an amazing writer and whatnot, sort of beat me to the punch. Basically wrote the same story that I was going to write, and probably wrote it 10 times better than I ever could have. But she was just, again, she didn't hesitate.
Or at least 10 times, at least sometimes faster.
Yeah. But it's funny.
Exactly. She acted. Yeah. She acted. Yeah, which is important.
The fact that the book that I had planned or was starting to plan was the thing that got me. The book that someone else sort of beat me to the punch with is like a funny sort of idea, but also like I imagine that happens every once in a while, or is you know, or some similar variation happens in that manner. And it's me hesitating and I imagine like even this book that I'm excited about right now, give it another month and I'll be like, I got something else. And whatever, you know, some dumb idea. But to me, it's the reason why I like it is it's allowing me to think and play with things that I haven't been able to sort of in my other work.
Yes.
Like I just landed, and someone last night said this is like crazy, and I'm like, yeah, it is a little crazy. I've been doing this collage thing now, which I didn't realize, my wife pointed out, for 2 years, and all the books that I've worked on in between and during this time frame have not been collage. The book that I'm signing off on here in a matter of like days when they get me the contract officially is the first time I will do collage in a book. Yeah.
Wow.
For 2 years, but it's because all the books that I've been working on are in a series that was set in a style that was not, you know, not collage. And so I can't drastically jump to collage and go, hey, it's just going to be a different aesthetic this time.
Well, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So like with, I'm working on this book for sort of the next book that I'm doing with Lucky Diaz. And it's like, so Palatero Man was followed up by La Guitarrista, and now we have another one that's coming out next year called Fix It Familia. And it's like this, there's a style that's very much sort of like a natural style for me. It's one that I, you know, was working in at the time that we did Palatero Man.
Yeah.
And it was, and even by then it was kind of established because I had a similar approach in Chloe Instead and Lately Lily and like a few books. And Vote for Our Future was right before Palatero Man, and Vote for Our Future I think looks the most like Palatero Man of any other book. And it was kind of like those things just kind of, it was like of a kind of a moment and a time. And so that's really, I think, an interesting illustration challenge is when you have those books that have kind of like a style that's associated with them, right? So it's like you're in a series, but like you don't want it to get stale. What are the little things that you do to kind of like refresh that style without going too far away from it so it's recognizable, but it still kind of like stays fresh from book to book? Yeah. Do you find that to be an interesting challenge?
Yeah, I mean, even the book that I'm working on right now, which is the fourth in that series, if I look at it, it is aesthetically better than the first one, and it's primarily because I've honed in. Yeah. You know, I've figured out what works and what doesn't work, and maybe I'm putting more effort into it because I'm trying to like outdo myself. And so like if you looked at the series, you would probably go, oh, there's definitely a different aesthetic that's coming out of it. It's still the same world, it's still the same characters, but it's like the rendering is just a little bit better, or there's some choices that are being made just because I learned the system for the book. And if I went back to the first one, I would probably change a lot of things to make sure that it sort of lives up to that same world. But it does feel like it's of an era for me. Yeah. And so, you know, the by the time that I get the next written one or whatever comes around, I'll probably like, who knows? I may be doing something in a totally different approach at that point, and it will feel antiquated. But at this point, it feels feels fun and exciting because it's new and it's playful. And it'll be the first opportunity to try the thing that I've been doing and put it into practice, which is the other challenge that comes into play. Is just like, some of this is me playing, but some of this is also theoretical of like, well, if I had the opportunity, this is what I would do with it. And now I have that opportunity. So like, let's go hog wild. And this is to speak to that for those that are interested in this. This is probably going to hit home with a lot of folks. In order for me to take on the book, and the publisher knows this, and so this won't be a surprise to them, but it is less money than I wanted.
Yes.
But I'm taking it on because it's the first opportunity for me to try something different, and allows me to experiment in a way that, like, the payment is not necessarily the money. The payment is the freedom to try these things. But in order to say yes to it, I requested a meeting with the publisher to go over my ideas and to get permission. And I told them in the meeting, like, we had a Zoom meeting, and I've worked with a publisher before. They came to me saying, hey, we want you to do this book because we know that you could, you've done stuff in the past for us and we think you do a good job.
Yep.
But during the meeting, I told them, I know this is silly, and I know it doesn't mean anything to you, but it means something to me. I need you to give me permission. And I need permission to try and be experimental. And I said, I am not necessarily, I'm a rule breaker when it comes to art things. I'm not a rule breaker when it comes to expectations of others. If that makes any sense. So like what I needed from them was them going, yeah, you don't have to be as crisp and clear in your sketches as you are in previous things, because this is going to be collage and experimental, and you're going to play, and you can't nail that down. And so I needed that permission, and I just kind of looked at them. I'm like, can you just say it's okay? And they go, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And, it didn't mean anything to them. Like they've dealt with everything under the sun with illustrators and authors and things of the sort. But to me, that little, like, go ahead now has given me a green light to like go, okay, what if I do this?
Yep.
And so like I was asking him, like, it's a book. I won't give away the whole gist, but it's a book that's set at sea and a stormy sea. And I was like, what if I get some old navigation charts and I collage those into the piece? Could I do that? And they're like, yeah, as long as you don't put type in it, so it, international rights or like things, it doesn't get in the way of like the story. Go for it. And I'm like, no, I would paint on top of them and do these things, but is it okay if I collage that kind of stuff in? They're like, yep, go for it. And I'm like, whoa, what if I did this? And they're like, yeah, it's okay. You can try that. And it's silly because it is the, like, as you talked about before, like we sort of shortchange ourselves before we start. And I've never been willing to ask for permission or I've never been willing to push those buttons without fear. And now I've been told, like, they're not going to be upset, which is huge.
Well, I think you actually kind of like, you just hit on something that I've never thought about in quite that way before, but that's that, like, this is the superpower of traditional publishing, is that it is a space where it's designed to give us permission, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like it activates that part of yourself, especially as a creative little kid who wanted to, like, make people excited, and like you made work, right, to try to like make friends and to like get attention and like be seen by people and to like be understood by people. And it's almost like that's part of the magic of publishing, is that you have all of these people who their superpower is that they're very interested, they're very curious, they are there to give us permission, right, to do the best work that we can. And I think sometimes we kind of forget that, and we're like we're trying to like anticipate, trying to please, trying to kind of like earn our spot, right? To like, because I was talking to, have you had Leo Espinosa on here before?
Yes. Yeah.
one of my favorite people, and we're both in Utah, so we sort of are each other's lifeline sometimes when it comes to just kind of like talking about the industry together. And like, I'll call him up. I call him like Uncle Leo. I'll like give him a call, Uncle Leo. Yeah,
is he okay
like,
with that?
What's that?
Is he okay with you calling him Uncle Leo?
Well, we'll there's nobody here at this point. We can say whatever we want. But like, no, so I have like I just have so much, just in general, just respect for Leo. I just think he's amazing, but like one thing that he I'm trying to think where I was going with this. Oh, it was like this sense of like I totally lost my train of thought because I said Uncle Leo and then something happened. But basically it's like this sense of like when we're working in this space, and that space kind of gives us permission to do our best work. Oh, okay, that's what it was. We both kind of suffer from the sense that like we have got to always be like the easy person to work with. Like this is something that like, and I don't know if that's something that you have too in your brain, where it's like because we feel so lucky to be doing this, it's always like we never want to say like no, we never want to like get into an argument. Like we always want to kind of like solve the problem. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So if there's something that comes up and they really want something done, like our sort of gut instinct is to like figure out how to do it and figure out how to solve the problem. And so now I'll detach Leo from it, so I'm not speaking for him. But like that's a big thing for me, is this sense of like, okay, I just want to make sure that I'm so easy and that people just think I'm nice and they'll want to work with me again, right? And I think sometimes like in that eagerness that I have to like want to be someone who, is easy to work with, sometimes I forget that like nobody is trying to get rid of me. You know what I mean? Like no one's sitting there going like, we just need one excuse and we're going to get rid of this piece of shit forever. Like it's like, that's not happening, right? But it's like your brain, I think, because we've dreamed of doing what we do, we have a chance to do what we do. But then also for me personally, like my own kind of history and background has this kind of like built-in kind of like worry, maybe attachment problems or something, where like I'm always afraid of like someone being like, well, now you've done it, I don't want to talk to you ever again. Like it's like this fear that I have, and every time I open an email, I'm always waiting to get an email from the publisher that's just like, this is the last straw, we never want to talk to you again. Like you send sketches in and you're waiting to get the note back that's just like, we can't believe that you even thought that this was worth publishing. Like it's always that, right? And instead, what happens over and over and over again? You get this lovely email from a lovely person who is like super rad and really excited to like make something cool happen with you. And they have great notes and really, really insightful perspective. And everyone just gives us permission to do good work, right? And they want us to do the best work we possibly can. They're not looking for excuses to get us in trouble. They're not looking for like, aha. I'll just name drop Chelsea over at Harper, Chelsea Donaldson, who I just love her. And one of the, like, she did that to me one time where she was just like, dude, like, it's just like we get to make kids books. Isn't this like the funnest thing in the world? This is so awesome. And like her kind of like approach, and I think the best art directors are like this, are always to kind of nudge the project forward, not to sort of like drag it to a halt. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the blessing, I guess, the sort of magic of publishing, is that like there are different kinds of people in the world, and some of them are like us. And some of them are like our art directors, and some of them are like our editors. And it's like the magic of books is this kind of like incredible miracle that happens as a combination of all those different kind of like gifts. You know what I mean? And so like I just am so grateful for editors and art directors, and just the way that they're part of like making these books happen, because there's a piece inside of me that like could just crawl inside a hole and disappear forever, right? Like if someone sent me one email that was just like, it was the biggest mistake of my life was trusting you to do a book, right? Like that, like first of all, I would believe them that they're 100% correct. It was the biggest mistake of you. Like, you never, ever should have given me the chance to do this. Like, and then I would just like give up and be sad and whatever. And it's like, it's kind of weird to admit that, right? Because it's not, I would like to believe that I have more resilience than that, and I would get up and dust myself off and whatever. But like, I am the person that I am, and I have a career because of all the people who instead like sent me a note that was like, you know what, dude, you're doing something really special, and this book like is going to be beautiful. Yeah. You know what I mean? And like those kinds of like those talents, like that side of the business is why I love what we do. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I respect people who can do self-publishing, and I think there's a place for it for sure. But I think I almost need to know that there's a group of people that are invested in this thing, and they are happy with how it's coming together, and they are rooting for me. And like, that's why publishing is, for me, that's the most special thing about it.
Well, I would venture to say the sentiment that comes into my mind too is that there's this tendency for us to think not just that the publisher is out to like get us and go, I got you, like, gigs up, kid. We got you cornered.
We know it's really going on. Exactly.
And instead, there's this like, everybody's rooting for you. Like, what value would there be for a publisher to root against you and somehow screw themselves out of money? And it'd be silly for them to do something of that sort. And so, but yet in the back of our head, and I have the same concerns of like, they're going to come back to me and go, like the equivalent of, you've worked with a publisher before, and they're going to come back to you and go, wow, you really bailed on this one because your first book was so much better. Like, they're never going to say that to you. They might say, well, this is a different market, or they might have some really constructive way to say it, but no one's going to come at you and go, you really like, you left us in the lurch on this one, and we're going to have to, write this one off at the end of the year.
Well, that's because they save that for the imaginary meetings that we imagine they have when we're not there. They would never say that directly to us. But yeah, no, exactly. And it's kind of like, and the other part is like, you get another book with the same publisher, and like your brain is like, this is your last chance, buddy, kind of a thing. Like, that's insane. Like, it's insane that your brain tells you that like, we're giving you one more chance with this other book deal that we're giving you. It's like, that's not like, who would do that, right? Like, you're just not going to get another gig. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to believe in this kind of like horrible version of events, right? Like, they're not going to like give you one more shot, which is like one more book, and we'll see whether you ever want to work with you again. It's like, no, like, you just like, you have the job, dude. Just calm down. You know what I mean? Like,
blacklist, ready to write your name down.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I don't know, man. I take it back. Yeah. Just so everyone knows, we're both really confident all the time, and I take back everything I just said. I'm just like I'm an alpha male, and I'm like ready for action. I'm ready for business all the time.
Let me get out my sports car and my motorcycle and my leather jacket.
I'm actually doing push-ups while we're making these sketches. Like, just so you know.
I'm mixing protein shakes in the background. That's my go-to. So let's obviously the confidence thing is something that is pretty standard fare across the board.
Of course.
But are there things that, like, there's that generic question that I can ask you that every, like, you come in to visit a school, you're doing a talk, and then they ask you, like, what's the one thing you wish you knew? Standard question. But what I want you to do is I want you to dig deeper than that and go, what's the one thing that like you knew too late and is not necessarily like the most important thing in the world, but like just one of those things that like, man, I wish someone just kind of told me that. You know, like
well, obviously,
like, you know, the most important thing is like, I don't want the most important thing. I want the thing that's just like, you don't really need this, but it's kind of a cool thing now that I know that it's out there.
good. That's such a well kind of formatted question. I was going to joke and say I wish someone would have reminded me that when you over sharpen Prismacolors, your tips break constantly. Which I've broken like every single pencil that I've gotten, because I have like stylus hands now, right? Where it doesn't matter how hard you press, right? So like I'm just like destroying every pencil. So that's such a good question, man.
But wait. Does it always break because you over sharpen it, or have you dropped them? Because that's the problem. Prismacolor, Faber-Castell do not break like that when you sharpen them. Like I don't know. One of them's like more waxy or more oily or something of the sort.
Yeah.
But Prismacolors, if you even like look at it wrong, you can break that.
It breaks. Yeah, exactly. That's what's happening for me. And thank you for your expertise. Like this is like you just like you gave me a glimpse into a world I had not known. So there is a version of this career, right? That I think that like if I'm going to answer that question and try to figure out like what do I wish I would have like known before I got into kids or before I got into illustration, like what
in
specifically?
General. Just art making in general.
Well, I think we touched on a lot of it, because I think one of the things is like, even though it's wonderful that publishers are there to give us permission, right? Like the most important thing in the world is to give yourself permission, right?
Yeah.
So give yourself permission. Like don't wait for permission from someone else, because and I think the reason why I point that out about the publishers is I feel like they are dealing with a reality, and the reality is that something about some of us needs permission from other people, right? Like we sort of thrive on someone saying, like you said, just tell me I can do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's something about us and about a certain personality type that like responds to like getting that, right? But I think that like in a perfect world, we need to be able to give ourselves permission. So like don't wait for permission. And I think like nobody, you don't have to like have the official go ahead to do the thing. Like I think that's something for any kids who might come from a similar background to me, where they kind of like are a bit of rule followers in their the way they were raised or whatever. Like no one is going to say, okay, now go. You know what I mean? Like that part's not going to, like, I mean, it can happen, but don't wait for it to happen, because it's not like what you do is illegitimate because you're doing it based on your own, like, by telling yourself to do it. It's not illegitimate, right? Yeah. Like, it's not like don't wait for your turn. Like, I think that's something that like, maybe that's the biggest thing is don't wait for your fucking turn. Like, I feel like I must have spent, I don't know, 15 years, 20 years of my life, like waiting for my turn for things. You know what I mean? I don't know necessarily what that means specifically, but just kind of like, it's okay to just kind of do it, right? Like, and if you do it at the same time as someone else, that's okay. Like, it's not like you wrecked it all because you did it when someone else wanted to do it. Like don't be so polite that you like wait till everyone else has had a sip before you can try yours. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like, be a little selfish, right? Yeah, I think that's something that's hard to say and even harder to do, but be a little selfish, and it's okay that you got the job and someone else didn't get the job. Like, that's okay, right? Like, because like you deserve these opportunities, and when you have those opportunities, make the most of them. Don't kind of waste them. Understand that it's special to get the opportunity, but don't feel like somehow you've taken the opportunity from someone else, right? Like, that's not how life works. There's always like my favorite book, my favorite kids book manuscript that I illustrated. I guess I shouldn't say that, right? Because it's like the best. It's my favorite child or whatever. But I remember the
specific reason that the others have other special reasons that you're just not.
Yes, I love all my children. I love all the books, right? But Megan Mainer's like Not Enough Lollipops. When I got that manuscript, something about it like was just like, it really like affected me in some weird way, because it's a cute book about a kid who wins lollipops, and everyone at school wants a lollipop, and so she's trying to give as many lollipops away as she can, but like all the kids start worrying that maybe there won't be enough lollipops for all the kids to get a lollipop. You know what I mean? And it's like such a simple premise, but it's like so important for us to remember that like you're not going to do the last book. Like you didn't get the last gig. You know what I mean? Like there will always be other opportunities. Like there are enough opportunities to go around. And so like do the work that you have the chance to do. Don't like feel like you have to feel some kind of like, I don't know, like anxiety about whether it's sort of like, I don't know, like whether like it's okay. It's okay to have nice things. It's okay to have good things happen to you. Maybe I could say that as like some advice to give yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like it's okay. It's kind of nice when good things happen, and you should appreciate them because they don't happen all the time. You know what I mean? So like enjoy them when they're happening. And that seems a little bit abstract.
No, but
I'm trying to think. I don't know, but that's kind of what comes to mind. The other part might be the exact opposite of that, and which I think is also important. But I feel like this wasn't a huge problem for me, but it was enough of a problem that I should at least acknowledge it. Don't be in too big of a hurry either, right? So it's like don't feel like you have to wait, but also don't feel like every opportunity is going to disappear unless you act right this moment, right? And so because of that, I think like my first job out of school, I was at an apparel company, and every day I was just like, so like, I got to do this and I got to do this and I do this. And I have to crack the code of everything because I'm a recent graduate and I have to like prove that I have what it takes. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so I was the kind of person that would like show up at work like 20 minutes early and like go home an hour late. You know what I mean? Like just always like having to like overwork. You know what I mean?
You were that.
And I think,
yeah,
I guess so. You know, I think I was, and I think that's like, you know, calm down a little bit and just sort of like enjoy like the experience of absorbing from other people, learning from other people. You don't always have to have the answer. You can kind of like you can learn from the answers that other people have been able to put together. Like, don't be afraid of like of not knowing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, don't be afraid to just kind of be the novice for a little while. I think especially when you have kids that are just getting out of design school, it's like they want to like come on board and like prove that like school taught us all of the things we need to know to do our thing. You know what I mean? And it's okay to recognize that life is a long time and you'll be learning for your whole career, and you don't have to already know the answers to things. You know, like making up an answer to a question from Mark Hoffmann about the one thing that you should learn, like I'm doing right now. You know, maybe I don't have an answer to that.
I mean, all of this again. Like, I feel like there's going to be people watching who are like, you should be an inspirational speaker, and it comes out in all the like quotes that you put on things, and there is a love of like a whether you know it or not, you have a love or a gift for sort of getting people to think beyond just look at how this is a pretty picture. And I think that's a really like important thing. I see there is a question from someone in the audience here that I want to make sure I get to, which is Little Whisker Studio asks, I should go back and see if there's any other questions here, but Little Whisker Studio says, do you both like Blackwing pencils? That's the first question. There's a follow-up question, but I'm
dude.
Yeah,
I think Blackwing pencils are amazing. What do you think?
I've never used one.
Okay.
So I'm gonna make the statement of no. I don't think they're special.
Okay.
Because I've never used one, and so I can't really justify that they're special. I know a lot of people that love them.
Yes.
But I'm just like, you know what? Graphite's graphite to me. And I know that that's a simplification, and there's going to be someone out there from Blackwing that's going to hunt me down and, you know, slash my tires. But I'm not the person to like really go like, this material is better than this material at this point.
Okay, well, what I have to say for this person who probably just wants to geek out about a really cool pencil, and you're just like crapping all over them right now for no reason. like, no, I'm just kidding. But like, I think it's the texture. Like the texture of Blackwing graphite is really, really nice and smooth. And it's not like you can't get that from a Derwent or a Staedtler or like whatever. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of great pencils. And in fact, I doubt that if you found, like, if you did like a blind taste test, right, where you like draw a line, right, and it was like everybody used like, and you found like another pencil from another maker that was a similar kind of like ratio of hardness or whatever to graphite, like to binder to graphite, and like you compared it to a Blackwing, like I'm sure that you're 100% right, Mark, like 100%. But the reason why I care about Blackwings is because I didn't know about them. I didn't ever hear about them, like forever. For some reason, they just never came on my radar, right? But my oldest kid, who's a 20-year-old, like a photography student, like somewhere in the art department, they got the sort of like word from somebody about Blackwing somewhere. So they learned about it. And it might even have been their partner that had learned about it or whatever. We were on a vacation this summer for around 4th of July. We were in Monterey Bay, and we went to this like cool little coffee shop in Pacific Grove, and they had Blackwing pencils for sale, right? And so my kid was like, "Oh my gosh, Blackwing! Oh my god!" You know, like I'm so excited, and like I didn't know what it was, and so I think I have now this like love for that pencil because my kid was so excited, right, to find it, right? And so now it's encoded in my brain as, hell yeah, I like Blackwing, right? Like, cause like it's like hearing about a band or something. It's like, yeah, like it's a cool pencil.
Dad, these are the things that everybody should be using. You're like, yeah. I like those too. Those are, I'm hip to it.
Yeah, I get it.
So their follow-up question here is, it just disappeared. Hold on, let me get to it.
Oh no.
And you have great book ideas you love, but publishers have said no.
Okay, so what do you do?
I think just in general, have you ever had someone go,
oh,
bad idea?
Well, okay. Of course, right? Like, I mean, like, of course, like we pitch. And you can tell me that you have never pitched a book that didn't get picked up before, Mark, if you want. You can just be like, oh yeah, no, like if I send the book, it's getting made.
Yeah, I say, here's an email, you like it, how much are you going to pay me? Here's a number I suggest, and then they send it back to me, and that's it. It's
that, you know, that, yeah, you're just manifesting things. Well, no, so in fact, this goes back to that earlier thing about like confidence, right? I feel like I've had a couple of books that there was kind of like, I really believed in the book and I was super excited to do it. And it didn't get past like the first person who said, oh, I don't know, this isn't really for me. And I think like maybe if we look at like lessons to learn is that some of those books I should have shopped around more. You know what I mean? Like I should have kind of gone like, oh, you don't want it? Then maybe someone else wants it. Because so much about a book happening is that collision, don't you think? Between like your idea and the editor who sort of gets excited about it and wants to do it, right? So it's like, it's not like every idea that you have is going to automatically click with the same group of people that you've always sent stuff to, right? So it's kind of nice and important to sort of spread things out a little bit. Eventually, I think you find a home of people that you're just really comfortable working with and they get what you do. I'm really grateful for the editors that I have a chance to work with a little more often, especially on this. So you talked about how like you're kind of like venturing out into a longer format, right? Like with this book. The other book that I'm doing with Laurie Hornick is like a like almost, it's kind of a graphic novel. It's like an illustrated kind of like novel. So it's got like a lot more content than a picture book, right?
Okay.
And for me, like that was a huge opportunity to be able to do it. but it's also like it's a completely different muscle. So I'm like kind of like constantly in battle with it, right? Because be careful what you wish for, right? Like there's a part of you that's like, oh, I want to be able to do something that's just like no constraints, you know? And then once you're doing it, it's like I have like a lifetime of like stories and things that I want to say, and like little kind of like existential screams, right? Like inside of you that like that now they feel like they have a way out. You know what I mean? And it's the most wonderful feeling in the world, but it's also like I feel like, you know, really, really grateful every time that there's the trust in place to try something like that. You know what I mean? And I've never done anything like this before, and she's been really amazing to work with so far. And this is a moment is also with her. So it's kind of like you've got like you're like, this is the muscle we've worked on our whole career, right? Picture book, 32 spreads. Here we go. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like that rhythm is
32 spreads.
Okay, sorry, 32 pages. Yeah.
Are you sure you're
32 spreads?
32 spreads.
What you don't. They don't let you have 32 spreads, bro.
Yeah. No, they actually let me have less. That's I think the problem is that you're doing 32 spreads, not that I'm doing.
There's no paper. No paper is left. But like that sort of rhythm of 32 pages, right? Kind of like is like such a. It's like our language, right? Like we kind of like we naturally do it. And so like for me, like this is a moment was like that. It's like, okay, I want to be able to sort of use that rhythm, but also combine it with some slightly more personal like feelings, you know what I mean? And so so there's that. But then this longer book is sort of like a whole different thing. But because like you, I feel like I've spent so much time trying to like get myself to fit in that specific sort of like space, right? That it's like, it just feels decadent in some ways to like know that like I can spread out. And like you said, you can have a page where just nothing happens. You know what I mean? And then you have another page where nothing happens. And then you have like a chapter that is like really sad, and then a chapter that's really funny. You know what I mean? And like that kind of rhythm is something that I don't know, man. I feel like part of it maybe is getting older. Like it's like I'm now like at that point in my life where like these things that I daydreamed about. I always wanted to have a story about this, or I always wanted to have a story about that. It's like there's going to come a day when all of a sudden it's like time's up. You know what I mean? Like whatever that thing was you wanted to do, like I hope you did it because time's up. And I feel like there's got to be a reason why so many people that we admire produce some of their best work in their 50s, in their 60s, because you start sort of moving into that phase, right? Where you're like, time's up, time to do it for real, you know?
Now's the time.
Yeah. Time to do it. Yeah.
Is there something that, like, thinking about that, is there something that's on your bucket list of sort of kidlit world or just art making in general that like I got to get this thing done? It's been in, back burner, or I've been dreaming about this for ages and ages and ages, and I need to find the opportunity.
So many, and I just think it's like, I don't know, man. And like I feel like this one that I'm working on, so like a long format book is a bucket list thing. Like I just want to have a book that says something, whether or not it's as important as I want to believe that it is. It's important to me. You know what I mean? Like it's important to me that these words get said, and that they get said in a way that connects with, you know how it is. It's like if one person reads it and they just really, really get it, that's our problem, right? That's why you go like, should I start worrying about how many books sell, right? Like, should I start work? Because on a certain level, it's satisfying when a book sells really well, but the most satisfying thing is just knowing that it's like somebody's favorite book. You know what I mean? Like that is like, I think the most like gratifying feeling. Like Stephanie, my wife, is a teacher, and there's a kid in her class who takes Palatero Man. He has a copy of Palatero Man, and it is like threadbare. Like it is like she's a third grade teacher, second or third grade teacher, he has a paperback copy of the bilingual edition of Palatero Man. And he keeps that in his backpack as if it is a school supply, right? And every day, like she will see like multiple times, she'll see him kind of like pull it out and look through it, and it's getting to where like the paperback cover is like frayed, you know what I mean? Like, and to me, like, that is worth $1 million. You know what I mean? Like, that just kind of feeling that like those little expressions, those little moments that we stick into these books that really are designed to kind of transmit a feeling, right, that we have to the person, to the reader. Like, that feeling that somebody really was tuned in and they got the transmission has to be the best feeling in the world, don't you think?
I mean, I don't hear as many stories of like kids liking my book. I hear stories of adults liking it, which is good. But every once in a while I'll go into, you know, like if there's a school visit and they see it beforehand and you get up there in front of the crowd and then there's one of those kids that just goes like, I read your book. Like, I love your book. And it's like, that is the moment that's probably more exciting than, well, I mean, wait a second. Royalty checks, pretty cool. Pretty cool. There's you know, there's always fun getting a check for something you did ages ago. But those moments of like, the connection, that especially connections that you didn't know were there. And so, you know, sometimes it's people finding out that I did a book they didn't realize that I did, or like the one that always gets me is when someone finds my book in a store that I just like, oh, that book is not really out there. And then they go, oh, I saw this in the airport. And they're like, really? Oh, I didn't realize it was in the airport. And like, all of a sudden it's like, it you know, it has a life of its own, essentially, I think.
Or like a gift shop at a cool place, right? Like Lucky, one of the really unusual experiences I've had in my career is that Lucky Diaz, the author of Palatero Man, and I are really good friends. So like, we've been friends since like almost maybe 20 years, like somewhere in there, like 15, 20 years. And we got to be friends back when I was living in Southern California. He's still in LA. I'm in a little town called Cedar City, a little town in the mountains of Utah. And he's still back in LA. But we met way back then, and like back in like 2009, I think, is when we first kind of met. We immediately hit it off. And so one of the cool experiences of working with him on those books is that we had already worked together on a bunch of stuff. So I had done like his like CD designs because he's a kids musician. I had done like the jackets for his albums and kind of branded him, like that graphic design side of my brain branded his band, you know, back in the day. And so when the book kind of came together for Palatero Man, there's like this built-in kind of like friendship, right? That's kind of like already there. And so we work together in this really weird way where, like, you know how it normally is. Like, you get the manuscript, you like you do the sketches, you do the art, and like the author is almost never really involved, right? Like until the very end, maybe sketches. There's a time when they might have like some kind of like say at some point in the sketch phase, but for the most part, it's like there's very separate processes. But like with Lucky, it's like he's like, I have an idea for a book, and he'll like call me, and then we'll like talk through the idea for the book, and then he pitches the book, and then he gets the book deal, and then like the editor's like, Micah, do you want to do this book too? And like, yeah, I do. And like, so then we get like the sort of the formality of the deal, right? That comes together when it's kind of like, it's almost like things are theoretically happening the way they always do, where it's like we're both negotiating our contracts separately, all that stuff. But there's kind of this understanding that we're going to do these particular books together. You know what I mean? And like, so it's this really interesting thing, but that carries on to like when he will be out in the middle of, like, he does a lot more traveling than me. Right. So like I'm at home drawing all the time. Like that's my life, right? For the most part. And Lucky is on the road as a musician. So his band gets booked all over the country. And so a lot of the time that will be like kind of get combined with like book appearances and like school visits and stuff. You know what I mean? And so he's always traveling all the time. And my favorite thing is to get like a random text or message from Lucky out of nowhere, where our book is just in this crazy place that we never would have expected it to be. And you're right. Like that's like one of those like really satisfying feelings. Is like, oh, the book is at like the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like he'll be like you're like, oh, Micah, look, like you're like I found the Around the World puzzle at MoMA. You know what I mean? It's like, what? You know, it's like those kind of feelings. It is. It's very satisfying.
I had one of those where it was a book that was at some museum that I'm like, what? Wow, when? I don't know how that ended up there. I like how you said a word that actually like sparked a fear in my mind, and then it was actually the opposite when you said his band got booked, which is like, I'm so used to hearing book got banned, and I was like, oh no, and I was like, oh no wait, you said the opposite.
Stop banning books and start booking bands.
His band got booked. How could they? Let's see, I'm trying to.
Dude, I really love that. That's a phrase. We should do a pin that says less book bands and more booked bands.
T-shirts that say that, and then like in the style of like Metallica, like there's like, something that's a little over the top, sort of like metal.
$1 million idea, Mark Hoffman. You just did it.
We can do that. We can find a way to make that work.
Permission. You give ourselves permission.
More. Don't ban. No, wait. I'm trying. I feel like there's some other like weird play that could be put into it too. So it's, don't ban book, but books ban book. No, there's some like double wording that can get in there somewhere. So tell me a little bit, sort of history wise, because I know that there's the the design background, etc. But you had mentioned that you got into kidlit, and there is a level of interest that sort of sprang forth. Yeah, I know, fancy wording. Spring forth. It's called I didn't know what I was going to say there. Is there some was there some moment that sort of sparked it? Was it, like, for me, I kind of knew I wanted to do illustration, but I didn't know in what capacity I would end up. And I've been through a lot of different phases, but I imagine like as a designer, you're dealing with lots of type, and then all of a sudden one day you're like, you know what I want to do is stuff for kids. That had to have come from some source.
So I just gave this guy nipples because it's cold outside. So they're poking through his shirt.
Call them glass cutters.
So my favorite thing about this, for instance, like this whole experience of doodling with you is really fun because I was going to do either a forest or I was going to do a bunch of people's heads, and now it's like a forest with a bunch of heads in it, and it feels like a movie poster to me. So like I'm having a lot of fun. So I think like the history side for me is like I went into so at first studying design. And then I got an internship at an apparel company called Paul Frank. And I had some friends. What's that? Paul Frank? Yeah.
Did you that little monkey?
Well, I didn't create the monkey. Paul made the monkey. Paul created the monkey. But the way the company was set up is that we would do a lot of, we were kind of like the art department at Paul Frank was almost like a TV, like writer's room or something in some ways, in the sense that you had this kind of existing character property and you were producing and creating graphics that featured those characters, right? So there's a lot of new art that got created by all of us who were there, but there's also a lot of kind of like team kind of repurposing of pieces made by each other or by Paul or whatever. So it's kind of like, it's this weird combination of like illustration and product design kind of stuff. You know what I mean? That made it like a really, really fun job, like kind of like almost like one of those kind of unicorn jobs, right? And so when I interned there, that's when I was like, okay, I would much rather do this than go develop like an ad campaign for Gillette or something. You know what I mean? Like this is what I want to do. But like for a long time, I was so fixated on the idea of like how what a serious career that creative direction and art direction was, And so if I was going to be a real success, I would have to be successful at this serious thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But then going out to Paul Frank, it was kind of like you saw kind of the way that fun can be serious, like creating like a brand and making product that has a lot of like goofiness to it, a lot of like whimsy built into it. That can be a serious job, right? Like, because and there's something really wonderful about doing serious work to make fun things. And I think like that job in many ways started getting my brain moving to a place where it's like, no, man, picture books are like a serious project that happens to produce a fun result, right?
Yeah, that makes
and where that happened was Paul Frank did a lot of licensing. So the company was like, had a core art department, and then we would work with partners. And like our partner, like we had a partner to make bicycles. We had a partner to make we did all our accessories in-house, but we had partners for things kind of outside that, like stationery or watches or like that kind of stuff. Things that you needed to like glasses, like you need to know how to make glasses. It's not like we were all just going to decide that, oh, now we know how to make glasses. It's like we would design colorways that could get applied to glasses, or we make a graphic pattern that would go like on the inside of something, you know what I mean? But like there would be like another company that specialized in that kind of object that we would then kind of like make art packs that would get applied to those things, right?
Can you explain
So
colorways for people that may not know what that means?
So colorways is like different SKUs of a product where it has like you might have the same frame of sunglasses, but there's like 5 different variations of color, right? So so you have a blue one and a green one and a yellow one and a yellow and a black one and like whatever, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So you have these kind of, and those, and in strictly in apparel, colorways come down to like maybe you have like a specific like structure of a shirt or a skirt or a pair of pants or whatever, but the actual sort of like pattern that's being made after doesn't change, but there's a variation in you have a dark brown one, you have a charcoal gray one, you know what I mean, that kind of
Yep.
thing. So those are colorways, and in the work that the art department primarily did, we would develop palettes, we would develop kind of like graphics that would meet the needs of a merchandiser. So a merchandiser would be like, oh, this season, like trees are a really big deal, right? So trees are gonna, like we want to kind of like find something that sort of like taps in to a general interest that people are having in the boutique kind of like sector for kind of natural patterns, right? And that's the merchandiser would kind of like start looking at that, and then they talk to the designer, and the designer would start gathering like reference and just like things that they felt like really evoked the feeling they were hoping to kind of get, right? And then the art department would at Paul Frank was like unusually involved for in that process, in the sense that like we wouldn't just kind of like get it, and this would frustrate some people that would come on and work there from other companies, because it wasn't like you just made a ticket and then the artist does what you tell them to do. You know what I mean? Like at Paul Frank, it was this very collaborative kind of process where it's like you were working with the apparel designer on this particular thing. You know what I mean? And you kind of develop it together. And it was really fun and really exciting and really cool, but also the kind of thing that you could either you took it seriously or you didn't take it seriously. And it was one of those reminders of the fact that like, yeah, it's fun. It's important to be fun, but it's more fun when you're doing the work and it's successful, right? So it's like, it's not always fun to like blow deadlines or not get something in, you know, that meets the need that they're hoping to hit, right? So part of the challenge and the fun was meeting the need, right? And so that kind of like made that a really interesting kind of like first kind of gig, right? Yeah. And the people who were doing it that were there were really incredible at it, and I brought some of my own self to it that was really exciting and fun, and I had a chance to kind of like I felt like I had a chance to leave a little bit of my own mark, and I think everybody who really worked hard there did. Like they left little bits of themselves in the kind of like collage of what became the whole company, right? But like what I think was interesting for me was that in the process of, to get back to all that licensing stuff, in the process of making bikes and watches, right? All of it was still in trying to be in service of telling stories, right? So it was all, we were all still trying to like tell stories. And when I would lead a project, that was kind of my fixation, was like, okay, well, what if like the whole t-shirt line this particular season isn't just like a sort of like fashion story, because story means something different in fashion than it means in literature. Right? So a story, I don't know if you know much about fashion development, but so like have you ever heard that term story for like a fashion line?
I watched Project Runway. What are you talking about?
Yeah, right. Exactly. So like the story becomes all those things, the merch.
Who's your woman? What's she going from day to night?
Right, exactly, right, and that was the story, right, and so it has kind of like, it has its place, and it's different than like a literal story, right? And so what we kind of liked doing in the art department is like, well, what if you also kind of like, not only is it a story that's dealing with the designers sort of things they're trying to say about fashion for that season, right? But what if the graphics themselves also express the underlying ideas of the season through a literal story, right? And that's when, you know, your illustrator brain just like blooms. Like you're just like, thank God that I'm doing this. You know what I mean? Because it's so fun. Because all of a sudden now, like, you know that you have to have a shirt that sort of references like skate culture, right? Or something, right? But then like, so you build into the story that there's like, that they're building a skate park like in Planned Pines, in the town where all the characters live, right? So then you start kind of like going down that rabbit hole, and everyone kind of riffs ideas, and everyone kind of like creates like this real story. And I had a couple of chances where it's like the experiment was, okay, I'm actually just gonna, because I love writing stories, I'm just gonna write a whole story and then hand off like vignettes from that story for different people in the art department to illustrate. You know what I mean? And like those kinds of things were just really exciting. And along the way, Paul Frank got a license with Chronicle Books to do a gift line, right? And so part of that gift line was like stationery. Part of that gift line was like little like matching games, and part of that gift line was a series of picture books. And so like I had a chance to do the second picture book in the series, and it was this picture book called like Wild West Bonanza. It was like a Western story about Julius the monkey back in the Old West. And in the process of working on that book, I met who would become my editor for Chloe Instead, my first book at Chronicle. And so that's if you're being real, right? Like that's how everything happens, right? Like everything is kind of like you do a thing and you try your best to do the very best you can do at that thing. And along the way you meet people and you try to come through for those people. And then those people oftentimes become like a window to the next thing, right? Like that's kind of like how so much happens in what we do. And with me, it was like I had this great experience at Paul Frank. I got to do some books within licensing for this particular editor. And then I got that magic question where she was like, do you have anything that you would want to do that's just like your stuff? You know what I mean? Yeah. And it was like, when that question happens, and it's just like, that was the opening for me. And I pitched her the Around the World puzzle. And that was the beginning of my publishing career. And like little by little, it was just more and more of just that, more and more, and less and less and less. I quit my day job at Paul Frank to kind of, because I kind of felt like I had done, you get to a point where you've done everything that you can do within a certain set of parameters, right? Like, okay, I did my job really well with this thing. I feel good about what I did. Someone else can like take it and do something else with it, and it's going to be fine. Like once you've got the sort of like, you've done everything that you've contributed everything that you can, hopefully you leave it in a good place, and then you kind of try something new, right? So like then I
call that a
go ahead.
style guide. No, a like where you have like the colors and the logo and different
Style guide.
applications. Yeah, style guide.
Yeah, style guide.
It's like
so the last thing that I did
for someone else to walk in and be able to use and
Yeah.
not screw the thing up.
Yes, and the cool thing about PF is that my version of the style guide, which I was kind of in charge of putting together, like the before I left, the last thing that I did was the really detailed style guide to work with apparel people and people in basically like a licensing guide, right? It was one of the last things that I did. And it was really fun because, again, like there's a way to do that that's kind of like industry standard. But at Paul Frank, we had kind of been passed down this way of thinking from Paul Sunick, who is the founder of that company, who created that monkey character, right? Paul or Julius. Paul had this kind of way of thinking where it was kind of like he was so, and we all were, but like this kind of springs from him for the most part. It was all rooted in a kind of way of doing things in the mid-century. So this kind of way of like his big interest was like, okay, like when people did graphic design in the 50s, they were cutting things with a razor blade. They weren't just working on a computer.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So when you start working on these shapes, you got to think about how do you make a shape that you could cut with a razor blade? You know what I mean? Instead of just doing like, oh, I'm just going to do a shape that comes naturally in Adobe Illustrator. Instead, you want to sort of approach things as if like, what if you had to cut this out? You know what I mean? And it's like
perfect in all instances. Yeah.
Yeah. And it also, it can be perfect, but there's also these really subtle things that he built in, like that you want to make sure that like you don't have too many like perfectly right angles, right? So like where like a line meets a line, you want to be able to zoom in really close, and there should be a tiny bit of a curve, you know what I mean, in where that line goes to the next thing, you know what I mean? And it's just little things that were that he kind of put in. So the style guide was similar in the sense that there was a way that companies did style guides, but then we had this kind of like identity as a company that we sort of like approached things kind of off kilter and a little bit sort of like in this kind of guerrilla, like not to like, that's a bad pun, I guess, but like sort of like we were approaching things slightly more punk rock. Like we didn't want to do things just the exact way that Disney does things or something. You know what I mean? So when we built that style guide, it was a really fun exercise because it was kind of like I was able to sort of like approach a style guide in kind of, I wanted to meet the requirements that were necessary, but I also wanted to like approach it as if the whole thing was a design project. Like the style guide is a designed object instead of like a bunch of things thrown together into like a binder. You know what I mean? And so that project, over the course of it, like I felt like, okay, cool. If there's anything that I'm ever going to say or do, this is when I did it, right? And I got a chance to do it. And then like the people who, when I left, the people who were still there were like every bit as talented and creative and like driven and interesting as anything that I would do. But now they had kind of like a starting point to just not have to think about that particular piece of it, right? They could just kind of like go. And so that was really satisfying to feel like I didn't kind of leave it like a mess. I left it like there's something someone can use, you know?
Your legacy
and then
is not the individual pieces. Your legacy is the system in which they can build those pieces in the future.
Yeah, and kind of like making it a little easier to kind of assemble certain graphics and just whatever. And that doesn't mean that whatever it was that I did was like evergreen and it will never change and nothing, you know, I'm sure things have changed a lot since, and that was a long time ago. But it kind of made it so that there was a little bit of a foundation that I could feel good about leaving behind. And then I pitched Around the World Puzzle and then started doing publishing. And it was kind of like, it was a little bit of a tough time to do it. I also did some other work. I did like an apparel company called Lately Lily that sort of was a more like dove deeper into something that I like to call narrative-based design, where it's just kind of that same idea of like, you're going to do an apparel story, but it's a literal story. And that was a really fun project too that went on for a few years. But, you know, I kept coming back over and over to picture books, and little by little that just became, that's what I do all the time now. It's a good feeling. It's fun.
So I have, because we're talking about like the, you know, we talked a little bit about the challenges in the sense of the what I want to say the like psychology of being an artist, and then the sort of the pleasures in a way. But I see there's a question that comes from Jeremy Ray Ross that says, "What's the hardest part of being an author illustrator?" And so outside of the mental anguish that comes from these things, is there something that like it's going to sound I just realized I don't have my light on this whole time. I should brighten it up a bit.
Well, dude, I realized just barely that I had completely stopped drawing, and I was just talking to you. Like I was like zoned out talking, and like I hadn't drawn anything for like 20 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
So my question is sort of, is there something that who was I talking with the other day where we were talking about the wear and tear on the body as an illustrator and things that make it hard to sort of like, not to say that we're like we're out here slaving away on a regular basis, right. But there are things that illustrators deal with that are not always just like not the inferior artist. What's it called? The imposter syndrome. Beyond the imposter syndrome, beyond the mental sort of side of it, are there things that are like that are hard to do? Like I will admit, for me, I am not great at sketching and staying consistent, and that's just like it's a challenge that is probably going to be with me for the rest of my life, and that's okay. I've learned to sort of adapt to it and things of the sort. But is there something that you look at and you go like, I'm just not good at this, or?
Oh man, I mean, well, yeah, there's a zillion things. Didn't I tell you 15 minutes ago that like I'm constantly on the verge of hiding under a hole? Yeah. But like, there's a lot of things. I guess you said physical, and I guess have to say that like that brought up for me like something when you said like something that you never would have thought of that you wish you would have known. And it's like, get a really good chair.
Yep.
Like get a really, really, really good chair, and it will like spend as much as you can possibly get the best chair from the maximum amount of money that you can afford. You know what I mean? So like if you can afford, if you're one of these, like if you're rolling and you can get like a Herman Miller, like Embody or something, like you can drop $3,000 on a chair. It's like, do it. You know what I mean? Like do it. Like it's as important as like your computer, as your easel, as your desk, you know what I mean, is your chair. Don't you think? Because you are going to be in that chair a lot.
Chair and lights. And
yes.
A digital screen, like I imagine for me, the lights is just making sure that it's bright enough, making sure that I'm looking at sort of natural color as much as possible. Yeah. But for screen,
you never work digitally?
Rarely.
So you don't own own a Cintiq?
I don't own a Cintiq. I own an iPad.
So you own an iPad. You draw on your iPad once in a while.
I draw on the iPad for sketching. So for sketching for a book, I will do on an iPad. Yep. But the first book I did was digital. But now I did years of animation working on a Intuos, like a giant Intuos before Cintiqs. And I was very, very good at it. Like, I did it every day because it was a day job and whatnot. And so you get kind of used to it. But I am sort of in this space now where like digital, the only reason why I do digital is it's a means to an end. So like I will do digital touch up of like, there's a cat hair on something. You know what? I got to get rid of that. But like, no, I don't really want to work on the digital just because there's a love of getting my hands dirty.
No, I think that's awesome. But I guess I was just saying, like, because when you said that, like, sketching and consistency, like, digital is I feel like that's the absolute best thing about digital, right? Is being able to sort of like drill down into consistent shapes, and sometimes you can repeat a shape if you need to. You know what I mean? Like that's the sort of magic, unspoken.
You can pull those
blessing of digital.
You can pull those your hex colors. And make sure it's the exact same color as the thing next to it, No,
I have a palette. I build a palette about once every 2 or 3 years, and then I use that palette like for a long time. You know what I mean? And it's like I work from that palette. It'll shift book to book, but it's kind of like usually it's pulling a limited number of colors from a broader palette that I've assembled for a few years. Does that make sense? And I'll be like, okay, cool. I always know if I'm going to use a yellow, it's going to be that yellow. If I'm going to use a pink, it's going to be that pink. You know what I mean? Like that kind of like that's both a plus and a minus, because I think it can also get tired.
It's not that far off from what I do, because I'm, like you have 256 million colors that you can pull from and make a palette out of. I have whatever they sell at the store in that brand. And so, you know what I mean? Like I have a box here of colors, and it's got maybe, I don't know, I'm looking at maybe like 25 different colors, and then just mixtures of that. And I try to get a nice big, as healthy of a collection of colors to be able to play with. Yeah. But again, I have to work with those colors, because I can't invent new tubes of paint. So that's a similar setup, honestly. Like if you look, the pinks are going to be probably based on a certain pink that I have. If it's a bright pink, it's this fluorescent opera pink that shows up in a lot of things, and like, so be it. That's okay. I think that how do you like get your stuff to press? Do you send it in a flat file and they scan it, or do you scan it? Oh, I scan it. I never let them do it.
Okay.
And the reason being is, and this is like an OCD. I was talking with someone the other night again about this, of like, when I scan this, there's going to be things stuck to it, and little, because I'm working with glue, and there's going to be little things like one of the images I made the other night was an okay image, but I knew that I was going to have to go back in and do a little bit of Photoshop work on it to get rid of, like, cat hairs or crumbs or whatever it may be that's on the piece.
So your Photoshop is all prep. It's all the sort of like the end prep to go to press is Photoshop.
Yeah. So if I have to cut something out, I'll cut it out in Photoshop. That kind of thing. Like, that's it primarily. But one of the things that, like, it's hard for me, and I've said this on here before, it's hard for me to tell someone exactly what I don't want and what I do want in the finished piece, because I'm working with something that has texture. And so I showed this piece to someone the other day, and I was like, well, it's not perfect, because I would have gone back in and adjusted this one little thing right here and made, these minor tweaks and whatnot. And he goes like, oh, that's fine. You don't have to even deal with that. That's A-okay the way it is. But also in my head, I know that no one's going to see them, but I do need to go back in and tweak little edges. So like, even if I'm drawing with like a pencil here, it catches an edge of the paper. And like, to me, it may be not important for anybody else in this world, but if I don't fix that, it's going to feel problematic. It's going to feel unfinished. And so there is a need to go back in and do the digital stuff. But for the most part, it's like, the more that I can do it in the finished product, like the final thing, the better. I'd rather not have to do all that.
I love it. So did we answer the question, do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
I'm going to say yes. I see there's other questions in here of like, what did you guys think of Beetlejuice? And I haven't seen it, so I'm going to say, similar to what I said before, I don't think it's very good because I haven't seen it yet. It's like Blackwing. I've heard it's like Blackwing pencils, and it's just not very good.
Overrated. Overrated.
Yeah. Who needs it?
Okay, so you haven't seen Beetlejuice, and neither have I, so we can't answer that question. But on a related note, sequels, extensions to legacy properties, have you seen Alien Romulus?
I have not. Is it good?
Alien Romulus was fantastic.
The one that my wife and I watch a lot of bad movies and good movies. We just watched The Wailing, the Korean like horror movie. Okay. It's a really messed up, weird movie, and it's one of those ones where like you'll watch it and then go, I'm not sure what I just watched. And it was good, but I like, it's one of those ones where like afterwards you have to go like, what did that ending mean? Because I'm not 100% sure. And And last night we watched *Malignant*.
Ooh, how was that? No, it's a no.
It is a fun watch. I don't know if it's fun in the same sense as like it's an amazing thing that everybody must see. Yeah. I think it was fun in that it was sort of campy and like, I mean, the first few minutes of it, I was screaming at the thing like, why doesn't this lady go outside? Why is she still in her house? What? Like, you know, sort of questioning her mentality through it. And I don't know if that's a great thing in a movie. Like, you know, I couldn't suspend disbelief and say this lady's just not the brightest in the world or whatever. Well,
I mean that is like, isn't that just part of horror in general?
Yeah. Like, I also am not a jump scare person. I don't like I've never been, you know, it's my alpha male leaves very quickly during those kind of times.
I hate jump scares. Like anytime that you're watching a movie and they step in front of a mirror and they open the mirror to get their medicine, I'm like, oh fuck no. Nope.
Yep.
I'm out.
No, it's that, or like, yeah, it's the, and that movie has some of those kind of moments in it. And it's like, I don't want to feel like
unsafe.
Yeah. Like I like tension. Absolutely like tension. But I do not want to feel like someone's trying to like trick me in a way.
Yes.
I feel like those movies try to trick me in a way that I'm just like, I don't necessarily need that in my life. I got enough stress already going on that having that is not going to help me in any way, shape, or form. I'm trying to think if there's like a scary movie that I'm like actually really like that's like meant to like scare you, and I can't really think of one.
Not even Alien?
I mean, Alien is, yeah, I guess I like Alien, and so there's some of those like, yeah, where it comes crawling out of nowhere, or like the dark.
Yes.
But again, like there's a point, and I'm not going to ruin *Malignant* by saying this, but there was a point where like someone leaves this hallway, turns off the light, hears a noise behind them, and then goes, hello? And then walks down the dark hallway when they literally could go turn on the light they just turned off and look down the hallway. Yes. And it's like, you know, again, it's like, no. You idiot. Why? Like, what? Right. I can't fathom that someone's that dumb. And so, like, those movies just, like, they kind of get me in that same sort of, like, manner of why is someone's that stupid? They shouldn't be that stupid in general. I see someone says, Little Whiskers asked, favorite sequel film better than or equal to the original?
Oh gosh.
That's a tough one.
Well, I mean, obviously, we're Aliens. Yeah. The second Alien, Aliens, is as good as Alien, easily.
Is there, now, Aliens 3?
That's where things get complicated, right?
Like, I think Aliens, there's some moments in Aliens 3, or whatever it's called, that were kind of cool. But Aliens is by far the best of the bunch.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then Aliens. And then, so what do you think sequel-wise, where that sort of surpasses? I mean, there's obviously, like, I think Godfather 2 is like one of those classic kind of like statements, is a movie that at least is as good.
Everybody talks about Godfather 2 as being as equal or better than the first one, and I would probably agree with that. But I feel like there's probably something else that I'm like,
Empire Strikes Back. I mean,
I feel like there's one that I thought of the other day for this sort of thing where like I like the second one better, and then of course like the third one isn't as good. Like the equivalent of like, this is a bad statement. Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. I don't think it's better than the first one, but I think I laughed more at the second one.
Yeah, and like One Crazy Summer after Better Off Dead. You know what I mean? Yeah. Is not technically a sequel, but it's kind of a spiritual sequel. Is also extremely funny. Extremely funny.
Are you so fat?
But no one's seen it.
Bobcat, just having him in a movie is. Oh, wait a second. Police Academy, Citizens on Patrol, by far better than any of the previous.
Yeah, we've arrived. We've arrived. Yeah.
And once I said Bobcat, I'm like, that is it. Like, that's a movie I could watch, or I did watch as a kid over and over and over again. And so, like,
yep. Now we're talking.
that is up there. And the problem is, like, there aren't that many sequels that are out there.
That are great.
Hold on. I think not only is it better, but it's gotten better throughout the entire series, Fast and the Furious.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen those Fast and the Furious 10. Amazing.
I have not seen a single Fast and the Furious movie, not even one.
Oh, we started watching it as a joke in the sense of, like, this is going to be so bad. And now we're like, when it comes out in the theater, we're seeing it in the theater because it's so over the top ridiculous that it crosses back into that, like, this is kind of good.
Yeah.
And
it's almost like yeah, it's definitely everything that I understand about that series is that it is like executed with like perfection.
Yes. And like, you have to understand that The Rock and and Vin Diesel and all these people are going to be over the top and bad in more ways than one. And if you can get through that side of, come out the other side, you're going to go, I absolutely love Vin Diesel, and I think he's amazing because he has done this thing wherein everybody yells out family, and you go, that's amazing. Like, I want to be part of that family at this point. And so, if you have not seen it, I would highly suggest, knowing that it's campy, knowing that it's over the top, and it's ridiculous. Oh, like there's more coming, and I'm so excited for part. I don't even know what it's going to be called. I forget because it's part 10 was the end, but there's like a part 2 of it.
Okay, well, I have to say one of the most underrated sequels is Back to the Future 2.
Oh, I love Back to the Future 2.
Because I feel like it kind of gets treated as like sort of in between, right? Because it doesn't really, like, the whole story doesn't totally finish off. But I don't think there's any movie that like influenced me more as a child, like visually and pacing, as Back to the Future Part 2. And it's like, yes, Back to the Future as well. But when that movie came out, I was drawing hoverboards all the time. I was drawing every car that was flying was like had its wheels folded the way the DeLorean wheels fold. You know what I mean? Like the kind of like it was like, there's something about that movie that like nailed so perfectly what we imagined the future was going to be. And so that's a sequel that, like, whether or not it's like truly superior, that's a really important sequel.
The comments, there's stuff like The Dark Knight and Terminator 2, which are all great and everything, but I'm also going to throw into the mix, and I know this is probably not everyone's sort of cup of tea, and now I just lost what it was. What was it that I was going to say?
Titan.
Oh, shoot. What was the movie? Oh, well, I will add in Back to the Future. See, there's a question of nostalgia, too, because, like, I kind of, and this is embarrassing, but I kind of really liked Back to the Future 3.
A lot.
And it's not, did you say, oh, wow?
No, I said a lot. I like it a lot, too.
And it's partially because I like sort of cowboy stuff. And sort of like, there's some moments in it that are pretty good. Like, it's not a bad movie, but in no way is it as good as the originals or 1 or 2. But I feel like there's some, like, there's some other series that I've just loved everything of, and that's in that same sort of vein as like Fast and the Furious. But I'm gonna put Fast and the Furious up there at the top for me, probably because I think it's gotten exponentially more ridiculous, and in turn better because of it.
This is a really boring thing to say, but like almost undeniable. The Mission Impossible movies,
I can see that.
like, are ridiculously well crafted too. Like, they just kind of keep kind of upping the ante every time, but they're just not a cool movie to say that you like. But like, I genuinely like the Mission Impossible. So that's my Fast and the Furious. That's my dorky thing that I like.
Speaking to Tom Cruise, you think he's the hero, the everyman, That should.
No, I'm not like I'm not gonna say that I actually like am a fan of these movies, but I do feel like it's like when you have to do a sequel, and everything about the construction of those movies just kind of keeps like leveling up, leveling up, leveling up. That's my Fast and the Furious. It's like it's a guilty pleasure. I'm never gonna like say like at a party like, has anybody seen the new Mission Impossible? Like it's not gonna happen. But deep down, I think I really do like those movies.
Now,
you know, that's okay.
My wife and I, whenever there's a new Mission Impossible, we do have a PlayStation that allows us to watch DVDs and Blu-rays and whatnot. We will go to the library and get the Blu-ray of it just to watch all the like behind the scenes of Tom Cruise talking. All the people, like everybody that participates in one of those movies has to have some little bit in the behind the scenes going, I can't believe he did it. He's the most amazing person in the world. You know, it's really
contractually obligated to be just mind blown by his physical and mental acumen, right? Like, if you ever want to work with Tom Cruise again, you have to be like just gobsmacked at what a singular human being that he truly is. Like, yeah, you're right. The interviews are always like, oh, and to work with Tom Cruise, it's hilarious. Okay, now here's a question: Star Wars or Star Trek? Hands down.
For you,
hands down.
Too.
Are you watching Lower Decks?
We watched a bunch of them. We're going through the Next Generation show after show until we go through the whole thing. And we have seen most of them when we were younger, but we're trying to go through them, consistently.
Yeah, dude.
And it is, there's good ones, there's bad ones, etc. Lower Deck, I love primarily because of the two people. What's his name? Not Randy Quaid, is his son.
Yeah, Dennis Quaid. No, not Dennis Quaid. I think it's what is his name? It's like, but he's
Jack.
Yeah, his character.
Jack Quaid.
Right? Yes, he's great.
And Tawny Newsome, I think, are the ones. And
yeah,
both of them
so
are fantastic. And so, like, watching those, and it also plays into like so many silly tropes from the original.
Yes.
That I'm so like enamored with the gist of that. Star Wars is great, and I'm not knocking Star Wars. It's fine, but I like the campiness of Star Trek, and I like the fact that like it was one of those things that I grew up with more so because it was a show. So I just saw more of them.
And the fact that they had Cuban heels in the future, that's just pretty cool.
Wait, what's Cuban heels?
So like if you look at the boots that they're wearing, like when like the Star Trek boots that like in the original series, those are like really hip. They're like Beatle like kind of like mod boots. They have this really cool Cuban heel, kind of like sticks out a tiny bit in the back and then kind of comes down at a little point. It's like their space boots are like genuinely like very fashionable, like for the time the show was made. And I love it.
I'm gonna have to go watch that again. I mean, there's the stuff like Riker sitting in the chair, or the Riker like move that he does with the leg over the chair, and
because of his back, right? It was because of his back.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, he had a back brace that he had to wear because he like threw his back out, and so he would do the Riker maneuver as a way to kind of like be able to sit down without like messing with his back brace.
Oh, I didn't know that part of it. I mean, it makes sense now that you say it. Like, I'm like, okay, that makes total sense, but I didn't know that in particular. You're more of an expert than we are here. I have to crack the whip on my.
What? You said you liked Star Trek. You said you liked it. You said you liked it.
Yeah. Now, that being said, do I like some of the other shows? Like, I like what was the new one? The
Strange New World.
Yeah, like I like that one. I've not seen a lot of the others. I was not a Deep Space Nine person at that point. I had shifted.
Strange New Worlds is great.
Yeah, it's sort of goes back to the original series. It's a little campy. It's a little like there's I know folks that have mixed reactions about the musical episode.
I loved it.
Yeah, I liked it, but I know a lot of people who are
But
like,
see, I was a Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan, and I like loved the musical episodes like of those '90s shows, right? So kind of like, um, yeah, you know, things hit certain switches
okay,
for some
so
of us, right?
here's the next question. What is one? Oh wait, someone says best animated or stop motion movie.
Oh, of all time?
Yeah, let's go all time.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's kind of a weird one to say, but I really personally just love Fantastic Mr. Fox. Like because it's not because technically it's the best, because I think technically the best, in my opinion, Coraline is like technically like my favorite stop motion movie from just a technical standpoint. I just love how that movie looks. Um, but those are not going far back. It's like I feel like I'm just scratching the surface of what you could say. But I love the sort of sloppiness and kind of like just punk rock energy behind Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like, as far as an animated, I don't like a lot of animated movies just in general. I mean, like, I did like Wall-E just because there was, no dialogue through a majority of it. I know that all my students are like,
but I thought we were saying stop motion. I thought it had to be stop motion.
Okay, so is there stop motion? I mean, if it's stop motion, I like the clunkier stuff. Like I like the I don't even know if it's a movie as you would call it that, but like the Rankin Bass era kind of stuff. But
yeah,
I'm trying to think of
you're talking like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and stuff like that. Yeah.
Like I like that kind of like weirder, clunkier, not perfect sort of animation. What I was going to ask you, and this is another challenging one, but if you had to name one thing, like one movie or one property or IP that you love that you should be embarrassed by.
Well, I mean, I think I kind of got to it a little bit with the fact that I can actually admit that I like the Mission Impossible movies. That's embarrassing. But that's not truly embarrassing. I think true embarrassment. Oh my gosh, man.
Like,
well, first of all, it's not a really...
It could be any sort of like media per se.
Well, okay, like music. Like, I think when we get into guilty pleasure, right, music is where guilty pleasures really kick in.
Okay.
And for me, like I feel like it's kind of, it started as a guilty pleasure, but now I just like genuinely, I'm not ashamed in any way. Is like ELO, like Electric Light Orchestra, right? So kind of like that old 70s kind of like really over the top kind of like I get really carried away by songs like Living Thing, you know what I mean? Like I like it's a living thing, like that kind of stuff. Like really, like that's some real guilty pleasure stuff for me. I will sing that at the top of my lungs. Also like Sail Away by like Styx, right? Like those kind of songs, like that, like they're like the big kind of bombastic, kind of like overly produced 70s stuff. Because growing up, 70s music was like lame, right? So like my brother would be like, oh, the 70s. Like he was so into like the mod revival that like anything that was like before the Jam was just garbage, because the Jam was basically like solving all the problems caused by all that shitty music. You know what I mean? Like that was kind of like how the attitude was in my house. So like new wave stuff, like New Order and The Cure and Echo and the Bunnymen, that kind of stuff was like my big brother was like, that's cool music. That's now. The beginning of that stuff was like things like the Jam and New York Dolls and just these kind of proto-punk stuff, and like everything else is from that decade is garbage. And so I would find out about it later, right? So like legitimately great stuff, like T-Rex, right? Like which would have fit into the exact same kind of cool category of rad music that he was like shoving down my throat as a little kid, right? But he just had never heard of it, because back then you didn't have the internet. So if you didn't hear of something, you didn't hear about it, right? It was like you had this little slice of things you knew everything about, and then there was all these gaps, right? So I think guilty pleasure is just like there's a piece of me that still feels guilty with like how much I like genuinely love Electric Light Orchestra. Like I love it so much. It's like the best.
You're probably gonna hate me for this one. This one's my absolute go-to, and my wife thinks it's silly, and I know my son makes fun of the song even. Margaritaville.
Oh my
Like
gosh, yeah.
Jimmy Buffett. It is a song that like I would have. So I've said this on here before. I have this thing that I refer to as crotch punch music.
Oh.
The idea is that if my college self somehow was able to time travel to the future and see
They saw you.
and hear the stuff that I enjoy listening to, I would punch myself in the crotch as hard as I could, right? And so that's that kind of like John Denver, etc. And I remember thinking Margaritaville was the dumbest thing in the world. And now, anytime that that's on the radio, I'm like, that is by far the best music. And I will crank that song and sing it to the end of time. And, you know, do I want to be a parrot head? No. No interest.
No.
Do I want to? I remember, I forget, my wife and I were out in Hawaii at some point, and there was a, we're on a snorkeling trip or something like that, and they said that they had a buffet lunch, and we were both like, we don't want to go to a Jimmy Buffett lunch. And then we realized that like, oh no, it was a buffet, and we just didn't quite understand. And we didn't connect the dots in a way to be smart of any sort. But now I'm like, would I go to a buffet lunch, a Jimmy Buffett lunch? Yeah, I probably would. Just because it's so like over top and can't be. I'm trying to think. There's like other like movies. I've seen Biodome way too many times. So like horror movies.
What was that movie with Tom Selleck where he's a cop in the future and there's like those robot insects?
Oh, I don't know that one. That one sounds good though.
And there's these robot like insects that will like inject you to kill you. Like they crawl up your arm and they like have a needle that pops out and it like injects you. Like it's like a cop. He's a cop trying to get to the bottom of this mystery.
It's not Scanners or something like that, is it?
No, it's not Scanners, but it's something like that. It's something like that. But that's one that pops out of my brain as like there's all these like mysterious 80s sci-fi movies that kind of like blur together inside my head, and
I really want to see Ice Pirates again.
Yeah, dude.
And I remember it being like loving it as a kid, and now looking back at it, I'm like, it's got horrible ratings and whatnot, like review wise. But I was very fond of that.
Well, I feel like that movie had like a pervy reputation. You know what I mean? Like when we were kids.
Some pervy jokes in it. Now probably are relatively tame by comparison.
Right, but I think my parents were like, "Oh, this is like not what we were expecting." Kind of like energy.
I remember there was a. I was at my aunt and uncle's house, and this is gonna sound really. This is a weird situation. Now that I look back at it, my brother. They set my brother up. They live in a totally different state, but they set my brother up with Runaway was the Tom Selleck. That's what someone says. With that's
it. Oh my gosh, thank you.
There was a time where my brother wanted to go like down and stay with my aunt and uncle, and I was like, sure, I'll go with. And so we went down there, and somehow they set us up on a double date with these two girls. And I'm like in middle school, like I have no idea what's going on.
What? See, those memories are the wildest memories. Like, how did this happen? You're on a date with these girls.
So we're on a date with these girls, and of course, like I'm this nerdy like middle school, and it's not even a date. It's just like we went out and had dinner, and then we were gonna go back to my aunt and uncle's place and watch a movie. And so we rented Weird Science. No, was it Weird Science? Yeah, Weird Science, the Val Kilmer one. And there was some joke in it.
No, Weird Science is not Val Kilmer.
Oh no, what's
Real Science?
Real
maybe
Genius. No.
Real Genius. Real Genius is Val Kilmer.
Yeah, that
Weird Science is the John Hughes one where they make the girl like the hot girl.
I'm thinking Real Genius. And there was a moment in it that was some sort of sexualized something or other that was like a little over the top. But my aunt and uncle are both very religious, and they
Yes.
happened to walk in during that and were horrified that we had rented that with these two like church girls that they had set us up with. Now
They believe in you.
they set up my brother. I was you have to bring your little brother along, otherwise you can't go do this thing. And so
Right.
that was my.
Was he 16? Was he 16?
He was in high school and I was in middle school. You know.
Because I feel like when we were kids, that was the magic age. So when you're 16, you could go on real dates. Yeah. At least that's how it was for my family. Like 16, like before then, it was all just sort of like practice, real dates.
Yeah, he was old enough to drive, and so that must have been 16 or something of that sort. But I had blocked that out of my memory until just like until now. I totally forgot about that.
Oh my gosh, this is so. I just want to talk forever, and like people, we're gonna let the numbers tick down to 0, and we're just gonna keep talking because I'm telling you, dude, so much stuff is coming to the top of my head.
Okay,
like. Why are we not talking about Neverending Story? Because Neverending Story is A, the most bomb-ass song of all time, and B, the raddest movie of all time as a kid, right? So it's like that. I feel like that movie, that's a guilty pleasure because like the theme song to Neverending Story lives like in my guts. Like that was the first song that like I remember hearing and just being like, this is God talking to me. Like it was like the perfect song. And like the girl in that movie, the Empress, right? Because like we were like when that movie came out, we must have been maybe 10, right? Like maybe like 9, 8, 9, 10, like it was like young, right? So like before puberty, before whatever, and that girl was the most beautiful human being that I had ever seen in my life, right? And it was like, I'll do anything for you, Empress. I'll do anything for you. Like you point me at the rock monster, I'll kill him. Whatever I have to do.
I'll drown my horse. I don't care.
I'll drown my horse. I'll slit the luck dragon's throat, whatever it takes. Like she was so gorgeous. And like as a kid, right? And then you watch it now and you're like, oh, she's like 11 years old. You know what I mean? And like as a little tiny kid, that's I think what was so amazing about the movie The Neverending Story is it was absolute. Well, yeah, sure. It was my sexual awakening. No, it's like the fact that it was self-contained to be absolutely for us, like for 7, 8, 9-year-old kids. You know what I mean? Like it was like it wasn't trying to be for every age. It didn't have to make sense to everyone because it emotionally made so much sense to a kid. Right? Like I feel like watching that movie, like now you're like, nothing happens in this movie. Like he goes on a quest and he never really kind of solves anything. And it's like all the same reactions that like the main character kid has where he's like, that's it? That's all that happens? But like somehow that movie just like grabbed me as a little kid. Like it was just like, it absolutely it's a long movie, but it was like emotionally just absolutely hooked me. I don't know how you felt about Neverending Story, but it would not be on the list of best sequels. Sequels that the most deeply disappointing sequels of all time. Neverending Story Part 2.
That was a rough one. I remember that one being awful and watching it thinking like, oh, this is going to be amazing. The other one was so good, and then that was an absolute letdown.
Yes.
I remember watching that.
But Return to Oz. I feel like every time we have conversations, like from our generation, eventually all roads lead to Return to Oz.
Now, Return to Oz is the Michael Jackson one with the what do they call those?
Oh no, that's The Wiz. That's The Wiz, and that was also
Return to Oz.
Return to Oz was this Disney movie in the late '80s. They made a movie where Dorothy goes back to Oz. And it is like the quintessential 80s. There's a moment in 80s kids movies where all of a sudden the movies get like so scary. Like so scary. Like somehow somebody was like, we're gonna treat kids with respect and we're gonna scare the living shit out of them. Like there's this moment, it's like Black Cauldron, right? Like for Disney cartoons, like all of a sudden just things get dark, you know? And like Secret of Nim, right? Where it's just like everything just like these bleak, amazing movies, but they're like bleak, right? And like Return to Oz is like that. It's like there's this scene in Return to Oz where Dorothy is trapped in this like queen. There's this queen who has like a collection of severed heads that she has. Like she tries on different heads. She wears different heads, and this is the most terrifying. Like as a kid, like my brain exploded. Like Dorothy sneaks into this room and she sees the queen get up out of bed and take off her head and put on a different head. And oh my gosh, you got to look up Return to Oz. It's amazing. And she sees Dorothy and she says, Dorothy Gale, and then all the severed heads open their eyes and they all go, Dorothy Gale. They all start saying it, and I was gone. I was terrified for the next
I don't remember that. I am gonna have to look that one up because that is like I've heard of it. But unless I saw a picture of it, I couldn't tell you whether I've seen that or not. And so
it's an era of scary kids movies, and it's one of the best.
I'm trying to think. There's like. Are there other ones that I can? I mean, there were certain movies that I absolutely loved that are. I don't think they're like the worst movies in the world, but like Solar Babies. I love Solar Babies.
Right.
And don't you laugh at it? How dare you?
Oh wait. My Solar Babies is it Kroll?
Oh, Kroll was good. Yeah.
What?
Was that?
Yeah, that's like a movie that's like legitimately sucks, but like I loved it, like Lady Hawk kind of thing, like those kind of movies that you just like into it.
The one with Tommy Cruise?
No, I don't think Tom Cruise was in Kroll. Isn't Kroll the one where like the am I thinking of the wrong movie with like the Clydesdales that like run really fast?
The Cyclops?
Yes.
Yeah, that I think
Tom Cruise was Legend.
That's the one. I was gonna say, do you have a thing for Tom Cruise? That's all I was wondering.
First of all, no, I don't, you son of a bitch. Actually, the first time I saw Tom Cruise like in a movie, I was just blown away at his sheer professionalism. This is a man who knows how to work, and he takes everything up to 11. You don't back down from a challenge when you're hanging out with Tom Cruise.
You're like, you know what movie I really love that's about racing? This little movie called Days of Thunder, and there's what's the name of the movie? He's an Irish guy. It's him and Nicole.
Oh, it's so great. It's like that's a movie about the beginning of America, and that's the way America. That's the America.
What's sad is I can't actually, for the joke, I can't remember the name of that movie. I just remember the basic plot.
Yeah, where he punches a horse.
Yeah. What is that movie called? All I want to say is Legends.
Well,
that's not it.
It's definitely called Far and Away.
Oh yeah, okay. Oh yeah. Wait a second. Who am I kidding? I'm asking the expert.
Because you know, as the world's biggest Tom Cruise fan, which is my new designation. Thank God I got to come on this show today, so we can talk about this. No, but so he's he comes to America, and Nicole Kidman's in it too, right? The big deal is that they were married, right, at the time, and that was like the big deal. But he punches a horse in that movie.
I remember, because he's like a rough and tumble, like fisticuff fighting dude at some point in it. I do remember that part of it.
Yeah.
Now I may not remember as many details as you do, but
I just remember like the small of his back was just like so supple. Okay, so do we have any? Are there any other publishing questions?
Yeah. Wait. You want to get back to that? All I see is the thing that Jeremy Ray Ross says, the laser beam statues. And I'm assuming that's in reference to something that we were talking about. But
oh yes, that's Neverending Story. Those the statues that shoot the kid. Oh my gosh, so good. So good.
Wait, more of your own mind. Okay, here we go. Here's a question that's it's an actual art question. It's from Illustrated. It's a ways back, but we'll get to it.
They've long since left.
Have you heard or experienced yourselves that you have to do more of your own marketing for your books nowadays?
Nowadays?
Yeah. The answer is
what do you
yeah. Every year, I feel like it gets more and more that you have to do.
Yeah, and I'm actually, I think that goes back to sort of like the last round of questions where they're like, what's something you wish you would have known? And I think it's like understanding that, and this is like something my agent says all the time. She's always like, an author, illustrator is a small business. You know what I mean? Like, it's like the whole endeavor is like a business. And so like that idea that like, you're not an employee of the publisher. And I think that's really hard to process because most of the time we function like employees. You know what I mean? Like we like get together for meetings, we talk about things, we hit sort of like benchmarks, we are kind of like, we get paid, not, you know, like an employee with a check or whatever, right? Salary, but we get paid at these certain specific benchmarks. So most of the time you're doing this job, you feel like an employee of the publisher. I think I do anyway. Like I feel like I'm part of a work group at a company, right? And in the best possible way, right? Because like we don't have a ton of meetings. We have like key meetings or whatever, right? But then the book comes out and you're reminded pretty fast that like, no, they're not just going to like expense everything for you and send you places and whatever. It's like you kind of think that's how it should be, right? Like mentally you think like, oh, like I did this thing for this company and I have to do this other thing for them. So of course they're going to pay for it. You know what I mean? And that's just not how it works most of the time. I think there are some people who move like goes back to that success thing. Like maybe they move so many units or they have like they're really an established sort of like, they're like a product in and of themselves, right? There are certain people in the industry that are that way. And I think those people tend to have bigger marketing budgets on their projects. So maybe more of that stuff is covered.
Those are the, you know, like the Tom Clancy's, that their name sells the book before the book itself does.
Yeah. And I think we have a few people, we just for ego's sake, let's not say the names, right? But like there are people that in our industry, in kids, that approach that, right? They kind of approach that space. And good for them. But like for most of us, we're kind of in a spot where we're sort of like, we're perpetually establishing our business. Like we're like a restaurant, right? Like we have to keep reminding people that we exist, that we're open on Sundays, and that like, you know, whatever. So yeah, I have noticed that I think you're right that it's increasingly this way. But me personally, and maybe this is just the kind of nature of my own career, I have never had a phase in my career where like I felt like marketing was kind of out of my hands. You know what I mean? Like I've just never had that phase.
There's always what I have seen is when I first got my book, there was like things that they would do, but it was not to the level that you see some people on Instagram. I mean, Instagram or these like social media sites, you see all these like, I'm going out to this fair, they're sending me to this thing, or, you know, they sent me these posters and whatnot. And I've had a few of those, but a majority is you have to do it yourself. You have to arrange the stores yourself, you know, like the events. There is the, like you said, the stars that get a lot of, you know, attention, but that attention also, like, it's hard to say that they aren't doing the work too. Like
exactly.
They may be doing the
because
work.
all the attention comes with new things to do. Yep. Nobody's just kind of going out doing it for them. I think, but it's interesting, right? Because, and this is something that Lucky and I have had a lot of conversations about how like, you know, you're always kind of perceiving other people as like the stars, you know what I mean? And it's like, in reality, like we're really, like it goes back to that original thing at the beginning of the conversation that like just the fact that you did a couple of books puts you in this kind of like very, very small club, you know what I mean, of people. And so it's almost like you have to kind of, that's one of the hardest things, is not only that you have to do the marketing, but you have to like be willing to accept and process that you're kind of worth marketing. You know what I mean? Like there's something to be said about who you are, about what you do. It's worth promoting. And I think that's the real struggle, is kind of like getting past the fact that it's not egotistical to like treat yourself as if you're worth promoting. You know what I mean? Like there's something worth saying about what you're doing, because I have a really hard time with that. Like I tend to be one of those people that gets like, oh, I don't want to like I feel like on Instagram, for instance, I'm always putting content up that's more about kind of like sharing something, or about trying to be trying to be engaging in a way that nothing is required of the person. Yeah. You know what I mean? So no one's like coming to my Instagram and getting like an assignment to go buy my books. You know what I mean? Like for the most part. But I kind of feel like that's my comfort zone. And every time that I post about work, that's takes real effort. Like I have to do that. You know what I mean? Like I have to it doesn't come naturally for me to do that, but it's really important.
Is there, are there things that you like when I first started out, there was a lot of money spent on my part to like, ooh, I got to go promote this thing. And yeah, maybe I still need to do that a little bit here and there, but I'm also of the mindset that like, I don't think it really makes a huge difference in sales to go out there and like, I'm going to make a sticker set. And like, I made enamel pins for one of the books that I worked on, and I've sold 5, but I had to order 100.
So sad.
And it's like,
that's so sad, Mark. Like most people, like when I do my enamel pins, I mean, that's a money maker for me. Like I can't keep them in stock. Yeah. I just burn. It's like you're right. Like these tchotchkes that people make, like what do they do? And it feels like most of that. And authors, you are a legitimate author illustrator. Like you do a broad run of author illustrated like work, and like also of course you're an illustrator with your other projects. But it's kind of like I do think that like for me, I find the pressure to market is bigger for the author than it is for the illustrator.
Yes, absolutely.
Don't you think it is?
No, absolutely.
I think,
I would add into that, like, and I've said this on here before, the idea that like going out and doing events as a illustrator, and I've heard this from other people too, as the illustrator of something that you did not write, it does feel awkward to go out there and be the person out there like trying to sell it, like somehow, like the kids or environments like bookstores and whatnot. It's always going to sell better if you're the author of the content than, hey, I got this manuscript and I drew the pictures for it. And it's not to say that our job is any way less than, but it's hard to go out there because what you're going to do at those events is you're going to read. And it's not always like, it's a hard sell. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, I would take a slightly different angle on it, just because I feel like so much of what I've done over the last, 10, 12 years or whatever that I've been doing this has been illustration. So like, I find that like, yes, when I was promoting books that I wrote, I feel like it's more natural. Like it's more of a natural kind of conversation, right? Because like people can say, well, why did you write this book? You know what I mean? Like that reason is, it's like, why did you illustrate this book? I got the offer from the publisher. Like it's like a not a satisfying answer. But that being said, I'm a big proponent of the fact that every illustrator is the second author of the book. Like every illustrator. Absolutely. And so like if you can own that, then I think you can get over that awkwardness, right? Like if you can own the fact that like your performance, like a lot of the time, like when people go see a band, right? They don't always know who wrote the songs, but they experience the performance, right? And so I think with illustration, when those of us who illustrate books, like, we're the performers. So we've taken the words, we've taken the idea, and we've kind of put it into action. I think like Dan Santat like did like the he put this really well. I think he actually put it on a book cover somewhere. It was like composed by, performed by, or something like that. You know, it was something like that on one of his books, and I thought like that's really cool to sort of like put that that sentiment into words, right? Because that really is the case. So I found that like it's so funny because I know as illustrators we go like, well, people would rather see the author. But then I'll talk to my author friends, and they're always like, "Oh, but kids just want to watch people draw."
The same thing that like we can get up there and we can perform in a way that is not, or that is more of a performance in front of the kids. For me, it's just a matter of like, I always, whenever I read someone else's text and someone goes like, or is listening to it, I always worry they're gonna just go, you know, oh, you that's not yours. And I know they're not thinking it, but again, it's one of those like nervous, like anxiety things in the back of my head that I just can't ever completely remove from the situation.
Completely silent.
Is there let's see, illustrators, so mom is drawing, so illustrators are the second authors. I mean, effectively, if we are not part of the equation, that book doesn't happen. That's just is a you know, the way that it works. I think it's a matter of it's a like a guilty conscience thing of in my case of, you know, I'm sitting there talking about it like somehow I don't want people to think I did the whole thing. And so I'm very clear with people saying like, you know, well, here's this person that did this lovely writing, and it's my job to take their words and enhance them, to make them, you know, shine or be better in some way. And I think that's, you know, absolutely valuable to the situation. It's a matter of I still, in the back of my mind, it's just never going to go away. That sort of thought of like, well, I'd be up here differently if it was mine, 100% mine.
Well, do you know why that's never going to go away?
Because I'm dumb.
No, because you're like you're not a sociopath.
Yeah.
It's because like you're like a human being with like a soul. So like it's like you cannot quiet that piece of yourself that just wants to make sure everybody knows that this isn't the me show, right? This is something that like, but I think that that's part of the challenge that we face, right? Is that we have to like maybe fight that just a tiny bit, because I think people need to know that this illustration side of it is a force of will, right? Like it is something that is birthed. Like you craft this thing, you carve it out of nothing. You know what I mean? And that's exactly the same thing that the author is doing, right? Like the only difference is the author is starting with like an idea or an outline, and you're starting with a manuscript, right? But then a good picture book manuscript is like absolutely incomplete, right? Like a good picture book manuscript is half done because the pictures do the rest. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so like, you know, I met this woman during the we just had this little tiny book festival in my little town. It's called the Southern Utah Book Festival. We had our first, it was this year was sort of the debut year, and it was put together by just some rad, like I feel like everything cool that ever happens is just like some rad retired couple that's like, I'm gonna do something cool. You know what I mean? So it's like this couple, they were school teachers, they moved here from I think Tucson, and they were just like, there should be a book festival here. So they kind of like put this together, and it's really wonderful. It was really fun. Came together really well for the first year. But there was an illustrator who came out, Daria Peoples. Do you know that name?
Sounds vaguely familiar, but.
So if you get a chance to look her up, she's great. Like she's really, really great. I had sort of like, it was my introduction to her was kind of like meeting her at the festival, and then I went and saw her books, and it was really cool. But she said something I thought that was really kind of like really interesting, and it was just like she kind of like was being asked by people like, oh, what happens when the author like how does a book happen? Because a lot of people often think the author finds the illustrator, right? And then like that's how the book happens is you find the author finds the illustrator and then they approach the publisher or something, right? And it was kind of like she mentioned something about how for her like when she got advice. I'm trying to remember who gave her this advice, but it was like oh my gosh, the name is leaving my head. But she got advice from a great picture book author who told her that if you read a manuscript, or no, picture book illustrator, that if you read a manuscript and you can't see the pictures in your head while you're reading the manuscript, don't take the job. And I was like, that is like maybe the best advice I have ever heard. You know what I mean? About manuscripts, because I have found myself in positions before where like I take the job because it seems, first of all, you know, we're human beings and we need to live. So like a big part of it is like, oh, I got a job, so I'm going to do the job, right? So there's been plenty of jobs that are done that for that reason. But some of them are much harder than others. And I think the reason really does come down to the fact that, like, if I'm being honest with myself, there's some manuscripts that I read it and I already see the book. You know what I mean? Like, as I read it. And then there's other manuscripts you read and it's like a real battle to get that thing dialed and to become a book, right?
No, I like every book that I've been offered has been, before I'm done reading, I immediately go like, oh, that's exactly how I set up that page, and that's how I set up that page, and it is true to form that if you don't see it, there's a disconnect, and you may never see it, or it's not your book, it's someone else's book that needs to be sort of produced.
What a cool thing to say. I really like that. It's not your book.
I do see a question, and it's okay to say it's someone else's book. Like I've had to turn down a book or two, you know, in my career, and it's one of them was one that I could have tackled, but it was the way that they approached it was clear to me. They were looking for a specific type of artist that would be better served by someone else. And you know, I didn't need them.
Anytime it feels like you're supposed to do like a tryout or something, it's like no, no thanks.
So I see Christie's Art Corner asks 2 questions. Oh no, I guess it's the same question. Just is there different? Oh, there's a couple words that were added. Can you talk about becoming consistent in your art making process?
Yeah. Why don't you do that?
After I said I'm not good at consistency. So consistency. So here's the thing. Like, I am one of the reasons why I am working on the idea for the book that I'm working on right now too. Is also it is aesthetically allows for inconsistency, and I say this phrase quite a bit on here, but consistency of inconsistency, or is consistent in its inconsistency. And so like I set up a world that allows for there to be a character who's, you know, in one shot has a head that's a little bit longer and the next shot's a little bit squatter, because it adds to the expression of, you know, what they're looking at or whatever it may be in their posing. And so like that inconsistency allows or adds to the equation. One of the things that I find, and I don't know if you do the same thing, but when I start on a book, in fact, I will tell this, in the publisher, they've heard this from me, but the book I'm working on right now, they said, hey, can you send us sample art? And now this is the 4th in the series. So I basically wrote them and said, you know, look at the first 3 books. There's your sample art. Like I'm not going to change the script at this point, but also it's hard for me to do a sample piece, because if I'm doing, let's say, spread 3, great, I send that into them, I finish the thing so it looks beautiful, but in reality then I go back and I go, okay, now I got to do spreads 1 and 2 and 4, 5, 6, etc. down the line, and I have to relearn the process, and I have to color match. And you know, I talked earlier about that idea of like not, you know, I have a select colors that I work from, but I can't just eyedropper it and get the exact same color. I have to spend some time trying to mix and get them to match right. And so it's actually easier for me to work on, like when I'm working on, I have the pieces over here in the corner. I'll work on one of, like, I'm working on, it's about a piggy bank. I will work on all the piggies at the same time so they're consistent. And then I'll go back and so I have them in batches. So the batch I'm working on right now has sofas and has washing machines in it. And so I am consistent with the color. I can work on all the washing machines at the same time. And it means that none of the pieces are finished. The book is due in a month. I don't have I actually have 2 pages that are done out of the entire, no, I guess 2 spreads that are done out of the entire book. But there's a lot of them that are at a point that are close to being done, but it's until I get to the day where I work on those last bits that are missing.
Yeah, like it kind of all comes together at once.
At
kind of
the last second, it's like, oh, I put in this one character on the last of these pages, and now the entire book is done. And so it means I have to shift I have to be like, here's the spread I'm working on now. Let me move it to the side and grab another one and grab another one. So I do them in batches of like 3 or 4, roughly. But it allows for that consistency.
Yeah. So, and I think like, and that's interesting because initially I interpreted her question to be, or their question to be like, about, like habits, right? Like consistently making art, getting into the habit. But, which I think is a different way of looking at the same question. So in case that is the question, like, I think like, I don't, the good news is I don't have an answer for you. I have terrible habits, but like, but I think if the question is what you answered, I like that question better because I think it has an answer. Because over the course of a book, like characters like will start to take shape, right? So like the more that you draw a character, the more they reveal themselves, right? So like once you when you sort of like design the character, that's one thing. But then as you start putting that character into motion and and this might be different for you because you came from animation. So maybe you do more sort of like development ahead of time. I don't know how you work when it comes to that stuff. Yeah. But so like, yeah, so it's like, I will do like I'll kind of design a character. I'll get kind of like a rough idea about the design for a character. But then once I start working on the book, that character tends to evolve over the course of working on the book. You know what I mean? And by the time you're done, the book, it's like the telephone game. The character is a little different, right, than at the beginning. And so it's really important to kind of, for my process, and this is more of a digital process, I think, it's like you work to the end and then you work all the way back in reverse. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like you kind of do the book, and then you go back to those earlier spreads and make sure that like those characters and designs are consistent with where they evolve, right, over the course of the book. And I think that kind of process can help people to not get so hung up on, well, how do I be consistent? How do I be consistent? You be consistent as you go. Like consistency comes into focus, right? Consistency isn't just something that like magically happens and you have the character perfect. Unless, you know, like you said, you're on the 4th book and the character has kind of arrived, right, at where it's going to be. Like, I think for me, that's a big part of it is like you said, like you hate doing test spreads because you know it's going to change, right? And for me, I'm kind of similar. But I think it's also important to understand that like a lot of the time those test spreads are for like sales meetings, right? Like it's like a chance for people to see a version of the book. Like a lot of the time that shouldn't actually end up being finished art for the book, especially if it's a rushed thing, right? But like, but yeah, I just think that if we're talking about consistency, that would be my best advice when you're working digitally is like, get working, get moving. Sketches normally, like I don't do absolutely perfect character design in a sketch phase very often. You know what I mean? Like I tend to kind of do some very rough character design in sketches. And then like the character really takes shape in final art for me a lot of the time.
Yeah, see, I think the other problem for me is that I do a lot of like when I end up doing sketching, I end up going a little overboard and making the sketches too perfect, and so that idea
pays off though, right? That does pay off in the end because you're not resolving the problem when you do the final work.
I don't know. I would argue the other direction. I think it actually makes it more challenging for me because I am then held to a standard that I don't like the standard. Or you know, like it's the equivalent of if something is lined up perfectly for something that they see, and if I'm off by half an inch, then
Yeah.
oh well, that isn't the way that you pitched it before, and now we're gonna, you know, it's problematic with the way that we designed this or whatnot.
Dude, I've heard that referred to. I've heard that referred to as your final art has to cash the checks that your sketches wrote, right? Like, and like that. I'm trying to remember where I heard that. Maybe it's just something brilliant that I said at some point in my life, but like I think I heard it from someone else. But yeah, it's like sometimes you're right. The sketches make a promise, right? And sometimes I find that like on sketches that I've gotten really, really precise with, that ends up getting more notes like than the sketches that are just like scribbly doodahs, right? Like I'll like have a page like oh like perfect drawing, spread, and then I'll get to a spread that's like it's a crowd scene, so it's just a bunch of like doodly like nothing, and then I'm like and then move on to the next spread, right? Because like this is gonna be a lot of work, so I'm not doing a big sketch, but you get it, it's a crowd, right? Whatever. And it's like those spreads never get notes. They never get notes in sketches, but the sketches that are really like executed will get like really like analyzed and very like addressed, right? In a way that, yeah, the loose ones don't.
The good thing about having a really final sketch and having that consistency is once I get approval, I don't end up with a lot of corrections after the fact. You know,
exactly.
When I get to the final artwork, I don't get a lot of like, oh, can you change the color on this? Can you move this around? Because it's sort of locked in early. But I also think, you know, I agree with in the sense of like, and it's a battle that we've had sort of in the school of talking to students about sort of like what is necessary to get the idea across to your audience and what is frivolous and over the top. And there's some people who like their sketches are these beautiful, absolutely gorgeous, you know, renderings and things of the sort. And then you look and you find someone who has their sketch is a scribble, and you go, oh, well, that's not, you know, like they didn't put as much time into it. And it's not necessarily they didn't put as much time into it. It's just not everybody. Clarity does not come from render. Clarity comes from understanding what's there. And sometimes it does need that render for some people. Like that helps clarify what they're trying to get across. Like especially if there's like lighting or things of the sort that are really important. Like if we look at something like Christopher Denise's Night Owl, like that piece needs some sort of like understanding of how light is going to work in that book because of
well, like itty bitty Betty Blob, like was the sketches were almost final art. You know what I mean? Like because so like basically because the book is such like limited color and then it just has pops of color, it's like it just made sense to like basically finish it. You know what I mean? Like in the sketch phase, so that like you're not kind of like doing the work twice. You know what I mean? But then in other stuff where you're going to go to full color, like the opposite is true. Like put the work into the final art and like let the sketches just kind of be your guide.
But I think that's the point where I'm at. Like I've gotten to this, and I'm very happy that I'm going to be able to do it. But I love the idea of making, you know, of having a clear image. But I also know that I'm working in a medium that no matter what I sketch, I'm going to cut it a little awkward. There's going to be some weird colors. There's going to be, you know, things are not going to be perfect in the way that the sketch may be. Like I'm not going to be as accurate as a sketch is. There's just no feasible way for me to do that with the materials, just because stuff, you know, colors line up differently and edge is slightly off. And I'm not going to go back in and do a bunch of digital retouch just to make it match some sort of predefined sketch that I've done. And so the challenge for me now, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, I might have to do a lot more corrections after the fact because there's that inconsistency. But it also means that I'm given a little bit more freedom. And I was given permission, again, like we talked about, I was given permission to play. And that is huge in the medium. And I told them, like, my sketches for this are going to be way looser than anything you've ever seen, just because I don't know where it's going to go until I start cutting stuff out and putting stuff down. I will give them sample art because it is a unknown. Like, I really don't know what it's going to look like until I do it.
You need that exploration yourself, right? So you're going to have to like investigate this a little bit. And so that's where the sample art comes from.
So I'm going to have to do more character studies. Like, you know, a lot of the books I work on, and maybe this is my own, you know, problem that I probably shouldn't do, but when I work on some of these, some of the books I've worked on, I don't do a ton of sketches. I don't do like 20 sketches of a spread. I do like 2 or 3, and that's it. And one of those is going to work. Sometimes it's the first sketch that works, right? But I also know that I'm not reinventing something. A lot of times it's a book that's already pretty predefined, or there isn't some, like, you know, crazy new thing that's being introduced. And so I don't have to worry about it being 100% on first pass. Now, if I'm working with a new medium, now I do have to like do a lot more tests, and I have to do a lot more sort of like proofing at the beginning, because what I don't want to do is say, hey, this is going to work out, and then go start it and it doesn't work out. That would probably be a big challenge, or a concern that I would have to deal with at a later point. So it's you know, and going back to that idea of like the consistency of art making, like the question that you read originally too, I want to get back to that, which is I think I'm inconsistent in the time frame that I set down to make art, but the one thing that I do really love are these gabbing doodles, because it is a time that's dedicated, that I know happens every week. Like, this is the one consistent time that I work on something, is when I do gabbing doodle. Otherwise, it's, you know, life, kids, or kid in my case, you know, who needs to be picked up from various things, and school. I have meetings that pop up with my role as a chair. I have to go in for events that are sort of irregular at best. And so there is no consistent, like, there are some people who, like, I got to be in my studio from 8 in the morning until 5 at night, and I'm there every day. My life doesn't allow for that. My wife doesn't allow for that.
Well, I feel like my schedule is kind of like a hybrid. Like, I will get into very like specific, like for me it tends to be like 9 a.m. to like 10 p.m. like when I'm in like work mode. You know what I mean? Like and I'll have breaks. I'll have breaks in the middle. Like I'll have lunch, I'll go do other things. But that's kind of like time that my mind has accounted for as work time, right? Like, that's when I need to be working. But a lot of different kinds of work can happen in that time, right? You got to answer emails. You got to get back to your agent. You've got to like do some social media to make sure people remember that you exist, like that kind of stuff. Right? So it's like, so there's that. But like in the end, it's like my brain does kind of like kick into this idea that it's like 9 to 10. It used to be like I would be able to and this is a problem. One of my really good friends like pointed this out. They were like, you know, we have all of these bad memories of being so young that you could like squeeze like absolutely every drop of life out of yourself to finish a job. You know what I mean? Like you basically like when the deadline was approaching, like you just wouldn't sleep for you know, a week and a half, 2 weeks. You're just like working through the night, and you're just like drinking coffee and you're just absolutely just like wired. You know what I mean? And I've found that I hit a point, and it was really right around when I turned 40, where that was no longer actually possible. You know what I mean? Like it became less and less possible. So now I've got, if I'm lucky, I've got maybe one night in a job where I can go all night. You know what I mean? And I can like get this thing over the finish line at the end. You know what I mean? Like just thrive. Like you're just like, you pop in pills and you go for it. You know what I mean? Like that happens for me. I have one. So I have to be really judicious. I have got to know for a fact that one night can do it, or all I do is waste the next day with my utter destruction of myself, right? So like the next day is like, so that's where 10 o'clock comes in. Like for me, superstitiously, when I'm in work mode, I go to bed at 10. You know what I mean? Like until, and then I get up, I do my stuff in the morning, and I get working again at 9 a.m. And that's my new version of all-nighter work mode. You know what I mean? Is like you get consistent, you work all day, you go to bed at 10. And then you do that until the last night when you're going to get all the last little details together. And on that last night, then you pretend that you're 23 again, and you're just up until it's finished. You know what I mean? Like you're just going through the whole thing to like get all the loose ends tied up. But if you try to do those kind of like blast it out into the midnight hour kind of a thing in your mid 40s coming into your 50s, like I just think you're going to die.
Yeah. I mean, there's sometimes like right now, because I got sick so densely, let's put it that way, that I'm going to be in a situation where I have to make some like, some later nights to meet the deadline. And it's okay, but I definitely have shifted gears on my expectations of what I'm willing to sacrifice. So at this point, weekends are sort of out of the question unless I'm not going to make that deadline, and then I will open those doors. Or if I miss a day during the week because of some conflict, sometimes you have to make it up. But I am not going to sacrifice, family time on the weekends or relaxation, because I have come to the point where I know that if I don't get some sort of like rest or relaxation, I can't even say the word relaxation at some point, it will come back to bite me. And
you'll get burned out. Like you'll just kind of fry, and then you're like no good to anybody.
Have you ever missed a deadline?
Yes, and in fact,
you're missing one right now.
Okay, so here's what here's what I have never done. I have never made a book late, right? So I've never like been so late on art that a book had to get moved, right? Like that's not something. But I also had someone tell me recently that like, dude, if that ever happens, it's not the end of the world, man. So just like calm the hell down. Like I wear it like a badge of honor. Like I have never blah, 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 blah. And it's like, sometimes it has to happen and just like give it up, like let it happen. But I have like been late on stuff. And by late initially, it was late, like a week late. I would like just beat myself up for being a week late, or being like a week and a half late or whatever. And now I kind of like understand a little more fully that like there are a lot of deadlines in publishing that are just kind of like somebody like threw a dart at a board and was like, that's the date. You know what I mean? It's like they're not the ones who have to do it. So it's like the deadlines become this kind of like, there's some padding that's built in there. So like I think it's okay to use some of that padding when you have to. You know what I mean? But that being said, I'm currently like, I'm pretty late on a book right now. And so like I got so paranoid a couple of times when I was talking, like, I was like, I hope the art director's like not like watching this. Like right now, will I go like, my secret is revealed that I'm still late on this book. I'm almost done. Like I'm so close. I'm like almost done. And so my last night to like power through and get this thing finished, I'm feeling like it's coming up on like Thursday or Friday of this week will be like that night. You know what I mean? Where it's like to the end, totally done. But to be honest, man, like headspace can really mess with me sometimes. This year's been like, I don't want to get into too much personal stuff, but like I lost my mom last year. And so when her anniversary came up for her death, that was really like, it surprised me, like how much it kind of like derailed. Yeah, like it really derailed my like time management a lot. And so stuff like that, that's why I'm so grateful for the fact that like we really are in an industry where like the ratio of assholes is so small. You know what I mean? Like have you ever been like, do you live out east, right? Where are you at?
I'm in New Hampshire.
See, that's so lucky, right? Because you can hop on the train and go like see people, right? Like I think that's wonderful, and I'm sure you do that all the time. But like for me, New York is like, it's like a once a year kind of trip, right? Like once a year, if I'm very fortunate, you know, I will go out and I'll have meetings with people and I'll kind of have some in-person time, right? With people that I work with. And I remember the first year that I did that, because I was encouraged to do it by my agent, Lori Nowicki, who like just had a birthday. So happy birthday, Lori, if you ever watch this video. She's a really great, like just kind of like soul. She's a fantastic person to have in your life. And we're all really grateful for her, those of us who are represented with her. But like, she gave me a few like really interesting little like bits of wisdom, and one of them was make sure you try to come out to New York, like at least if it's not every year, at least every other year, just to like maintain relationships and stuff, right? So like, I went out for the first time when she had suggested I come out and visit people. So I went out, I was meeting some people for the first time, and this was before COVID. Oh my gosh, man, like the glory days, right? The glory days. Before COVID, when people were at the office, right? Like it was like this incredible thing to like go to Random House or go to Harper or go to Hachette, you know, like going to like the Learning Company, like going to Scholastic. Like you would go to these places and it was like just a hive of activity. You know what I mean? Like just this kind of like crazy, like it really was the thing that we saw as kids in movies about the publisher. You know what I mean? Like it felt that way. Like for me, like the first time I went to like Abrams or even Chronicle, which is a smaller version, a very intimate version of that. It's just like Chronicle actually is so special. Like it's like going to just like your friend's house. You know what I mean? Like Chronicle is kind of a different energy. But like the New York publishers for me really felt like Lois Lane was going to work there somewhere. You know what I mean? Like it just felt like so bustling and so whatever. So I come out for the first time to like have that experience. And this was probably like maybe 2015, 2016, something in there. And I get on this elevator, and I think it was to go up to Roaring Brook. Yep. You know what I mean? And that's a imprint of who? Who is that?
Who is Roaring Brook?
It's like Macmillan, I think.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head.
Right. So I'm going there, and so I'm going. We'll just say it was Macmillan, right? So like, I'm in the elevator, and at the time where their offices were in the same building as like a bunch of financial services, like kind of like investment bros. You know what I mean? So like. I'm on this elevator, and it's like douchebags, like kind of around me. You know what I mean? And little by little, as I go up, like floor stop, douchebag gets off, and then you get up, you hit this floor, and like wonderful lady steps on. Like really friendly dude, like just like this kind of like this thing where it was like, and then I get to the floor and I step off, and I just remember feeling like just this overwhelming gratitude, right? That like the people who do this are so great. You know what I mean? Like just like to a person, they're so great. and we could instead be dealing with the other floors on that building. You know what I mean? Like maybe we'd make more money. Maybe we'd take a few more jet ski vacations. I don't know, right? But just that, like, the just amazing people who work in publishing is such a it's such a privilege.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, to be able to, those are the people that you work with. And that's why it's so, I think that's why the echo of that in my brain is like, oh my God, like any day now, like, this has to be over. Like, this dream's got to like come crashing down because of something stupid I did, because it really does. Again, it's such a great group of people to be working with. Now, that being said, these are challenging times and it's not all roses, right? Like, and I think, unfortunately, some really great people are losing their jobs. You know what I mean? Like, some really amazing people, who you just kind of thought were like just kind of a fixture, like people who would just kind of always be there, that are having to sort of like retire early, or their imprint kind of like gets like disappears, you know? Yeah. I mean, so it's like, it is a challenging time, but person to person, I don't think there's an industry that has like a higher ratio of just really fantastic people.
It's interesting because, like, even talking with students today, we were talking about deadlines, and there's a student who shall remain nameless who just basically hasn't done their work, and there was lots of excuses. It's understandable. There's going to be times where things are tough. And in some industries in illustration, it's tough luck. You got to get it done. Kidlit is one of those ones where I think there is the most flexibility and understanding. And obviously there's still deadlines. There's still things you got to do that, you're under contract. If people weren't nice, they could come after you and go, hey, this is due now, and you didn't deliver.
And if you start to kind of abuse that kind of good nature, right, then real quick you go into like the seventh circle of hell. Like I think, like, when you have it as good as we have it, and then you kind of abuse it, like, then I feel like that's kind of what you're getting at, right?
If you're
it's kind of like
for basically missing deadlines and causing problems, then people are not going to want to work with you. And that is, that happens in any industry. But there are industries like, working for the New York Times, where stuff needs to be in end of day, that start missing those deadlines. Well, that's an even bigger situation, because they're going to have to find someone else. And are they going to come back to you ever again? Probably not, because it is an industry where you have to be on the ball at all times. The way they operate. And it's one of those things to get across to people. Like, there's part of me as a teacher who wants to make sure they understand that you cannot push those boundaries. Even if people are going to be nice, and we know that Kidlit is a nice industry, that does not mean that every person in Kidlit is nice. That does not mean that there are some jerks. There are some people, or I shouldn't say jerks, but people who are not as understanding. And to be honest, it's totally fair, because they have quotas they have to meet. They have to make sure they get sales. Like, they are a proper business. But there's also things that are just out of their hands in certain cases. Like, like you had mentioned, like, if they have to go make sales, there are deadlines that they have to hit in order to actually sell the book in a certain time frame. Because if they don't get it out in front of the buyers, well, then it's never going to sell. And so there are times where you have to, like, be mindful. But I think for the most part in Kidlit, they build in enough extra time. Whereas, like, the New York Times, like, if they tell you it's due it's going to be printed the next day, that's when it's going to be printed. In books, they might say, hey, we need it by September 1st. And really, they need it by October 1st. But it's going to help their process if you get it in earlier. There are some.
Yeah, and so I don't want to give the impression that, like, I feel like, oh, it's just deadline schmedline. But I do think that there is kind of like you said, there are different callings in this life. right? And different people have different sort of like destinies, you might say. And I have a feeling that the destiny of the average like rip-roaring editorial illustrator for the New York Times is not the same destiny as the average like great picture book illustrator. You know what I mean? Like there's kind of like you find your rhythm, like you find your place where the people that you're working with are the kind of people that you respond to, they respond to you. And so, yeah, I think as a teacher, absolutely. You like every professor I ever had that really meant that was anything, like made sure that I knew that like you have to deliver, right? Like that's like your job as a teacher. But as somebody in this field, I just want people to know that there's a place for us somewhere, a place for us. It's like there is a place for people like you, and it might be kids illustration. You know what I mean? And what that means is that like how you feel about things matters. How you like your sort of mental state as a human being matters, and your sort of like but again, everything has to be reciprocated. So if somebody is putting their neck out for you to like buy you a little time, like make sure that you're putting your neck out for them by making the work a little better. You know what I mean? And like when you have that little tickle in the back of your mind that like, this should probably get changed. Don't leave it for them to send you a note that it should get changed, right? Like, go ahead and change it. Like, get it done so that when they get it, it's not like you're late and there's a bunch of work to do, right? Yeah. It's like you have to like be, and that's where it comes into play to be like pleasant to work with, is the sense that like you have a set of obligations, and those obligations are things that you have to take seriously. But what's amazing about kids, I feel like this has been my experience, is that in all those factors of what matters to the people that you're working with, one of those factors is you.
Yes.
Like they actually give a shit about you. They give a shit about how you're doing. They give a shit about like how this work is going to impact your career. And not to a like a exaggerated degree, right, where it matters more than the deadlines or more than the product or whatever. But it is a factor in a way that I didn't find when I was working in apparel. You know what I mean? Like I don't feel like in like product business, like factory effort kind of like design, which I think is the closest that I have felt to maybe experience at a place like the New York Times. It's like there is a factor in all of it that's like, hey, are you okay? How are you doing? How's everything going? And that's not just a bullshit question from most of the people that you'll be working with in kids. Like we actually, and it's like, but the trick is you have to actually care how they're doing too, right? Like you have to actually care about whether or not like you are adding to somebody else's burden by like indulging in your own kind of stuff. Right.
The challenge that I always had, and the, again, I've said some of this stuff on, I should stop saying that because I've talked on this so many times through so many.
You're going to repeat
I've
some
said
things.
these things before. But that idea of coming from that editorial world and animation world, sometimes you just got to do stuff because you're told to do it. Right? Like,
yes,
editorial world, especially on something like New York Times or some of the like speedier turnarounds, you don't have time to sit there and think and argue and go, well, I think I have a different vision for this and you need to listen to my vision. And so when I got into Kidlit, it was very sort of jarring to me, this idea of like, you care about what I want to do? And it was not that like I wanted to do wild things that were, super challenging or anything of the sort, but it was an unexpected thing that, coming from an industry where, not to say that people don't care in editorial, but they have a lot stricter limitations they have to play with. And so I have always felt like when I started out that I had to, like, when they gave me notes, I have to attend to every single note, and it has to be like they make the final call. And then I've realized as time goes on, I can sit there and say, actually, I think it'd be better if we did it this way. Or I've said to people, like, here's my sketches. This is the one that I think I'm going to do the best job on. This is the one that I think is going to come out the best, just based on sort of the color vision I have for it, or, you know, whatever it may be. And gotten a response like, yeah, okay, if you think that's the best one, do it.
Yes.
And in previous iterations of work, I may not have had that sort of like that opportunity, or have been too afraid to express my opinion. But going back to what we talked about at the beginning, like, no one's out to, in this industry, is out to get you. I don't think they're out to get you in any art illustration industry. It's a matter of they might have constraints that you may not know about, that you have to be mindful of. Hey, this stuff is due this day because we got to get it out to the printer. Otherwise, we're not going to get it back in time. Like, there may be stuff like that that just is sort of out of their control. And so, so be it. That's something that you can sort of like manage and sort of tackle.
And ask.
Yeah.
And ask. Say like, hey, if I don't get this to you by such and such a day, have I put you in an impossible position? You know what I mean? Like be aware of what the actual production dates are. Be aware of all that stuff, because there will come a day on projects where you need some extra time, but that extra time can't come from outer space, right? Like, it can't come from a different dimension. It has to exist. And so, like, so as much, like you said, as much people care, and I think it really is true that this is an industry where people do kind of give a crap about each other. Don't exhaust their well, right? Don't exhaust their well of goodwill, because it's got to go around. There's other people who need it too, right? Like, there's somebody else has something that they need. Someone else is going to need like a little bit of like extra time, or a little bit of understanding. And if you're using all the understanding, that's a precious resource, right?
Should I put eyeballs in this? Let's go.
Let me see.
Do you like it?
Oh my gosh.
Do you
love that?
Like them in there, or do you think that they're like silly?
I kind of like them personally, because I just think it gives you some way of directing the action. You know what I mean? There's only so much expressiveness that you have with a skull. Have you played with the colors? Do you definitely want to make them white?
I think I need to make them white, just because of the amount of white that's on the page, and connecting those eyes. I think if I make them a color, I mean, I can try. Let me see what happens.
No, they'd kind of disappear. But yeah, I was thinking like maybe that kind of purpley kind of whatever. Maybe
if they were yellow,
the white is great.
I mean, it could be. Let me see if I have any other scraps of that. Whoa, here's a scrap. Let's see what happens if I do this, because this could do it. What I want to make sure, like, the challenge for me is making sure there's enough pops of white throughout. But if I were to come in,
I think the
I think it needs.
I'm watching.
Yeah.
It needs to be white. It's very cool. It's very cool, and it's like you definitely need some element for. Again, that might be that side of us that likes to please, right? Oh, you need an element that can like direct attention or eyes or whatever. But I think just big empty sockets, you don't have enough to work with.
Yeah. It just they're talking to each other.
Yeah, I love this.
Out into the void. I don't know why I did a skeleton that's missing his hand, and why Kid has the skeleton's hand, and why there's a.
You're gonna find out.
Whatever. It is what it is. That's what these nights are.
Well, dude, so, this was awesome.
We are closing in on wrap up time. For in fact, because are you still drawing, or are you all set?
I think whatever I have drawn, this is what I have drawn, and it has been drawn.
What I was going to say is, why don't we do this, because we have just a few minutes. Why don't we zoom in on what we have, so people, like, I'm gonna so they can see a little closer look, and my wife can have a nice little small screen grab if she's paying attention, and that way people can see it. Like, I'm gonna put a nice little piece of board underneath mine, but if I can get in a little close so people can see some of the details and sort of like some of the nuance that's in it.
Yeah, I'm just gonna move it around. A lot of cigarettes in my particular drawing.
You
I've never smoked. I've never smoked a single cigarette in my entire life.
Well, we were talking about like
But I love,
machismo or something at one point. So
I just
I think
I just love to draw characters smoking for some reason. There's a little girl smoking.
it's
There's
part of that equation that you want to make sure everybody understands that you need a cigar.
this goes up to those ladies.
Let me get that in tighter. There we go. That's a little better, so people can see it. So end of night wrap up. You have been stellar. We had a conversation. I'll write these things as a nice little thank you to you anyways, but I've thoroughly enjoyed having a conversation with you. And for those that don't know Micah's work, get out there and get those books and spread said love. The new one is the itty bitty
Betty Bob
here. And I know Constance was on at the beginning. At some point, I don't know if they stayed on for the majority of it. But go out there, get these books. What is the next one that comes out officially?
So This Is a Moment comes out in April. Okay. Lucky Diaz and I have a new book called Fix It Familia that comes out in, I think, either March or May. So it's another kind of like next year. And yeah, okay. So lots of stuff. I'm actually working on a sequel to Betty Block right now, which is kind of fun. But that's not the one that's late. I haven't begun on that.
We want. Wait, there's your wall. A different wall, I think. I think it was a different wall. Is that who did the giraffe behind you?
Oh, that's mine.
Is that yours? Okay. I was like, there's something that feels sort of Tim Biscup-y.
Well, there's a lot of that because I kind of came up art-wise in Southern California, and so there's kind of like that's a piece in my brain that there's always a little tiny bit of that. But nobody is Tim Biscup. I think that he's in his own class, but there's some about those shapes and stuff that I think I like a lot of similar shapes.
Jordan Issip showed up in a lot of my work for a long, long time. Still, there's remnants of it that are there. Now it's like looking back, I'm like, oh, he did collage on paper or paint on collage paper, and like it's much more textural than what I do. But it's like he was definitely
it's there.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, there's these little things that are kind of in us, and I do feel like Tim Biscup is kind of like Gamma Go kind of stuff. It's like there's just something that I get kind of like it scratches something in my head for sure.
Well, thank you so much for being on. We will post this probably this weekend because we got the one tomorrow night, and it takes a while to post. And the only thing that we have to worry about, and we're going to cross our finger. I don't know how you cross a finger. Cross our fingers. Cross your fingers, cross your toes. No, cross your fingers, cross your toes, cross your eyes, and pick your nose. That's my...
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And vote, and make sure you vote.
Yes. I want to say I don't care which way you vote because that's the polite thing to say, but I care which way you vote, and please vote the correct way.
Yeah. I like that. I'll take it one step further and say the correct way is Kamala Harris. That's me, but that's me. That's just me. I'm really my mess.
It is the correct way. I don't think there's anybody in Kidlit that really thinks there may be one weirdo out there that thinks otherwise, but
if there is, we're gonna find out. We're gonna find out in the comments. What I said, like you're canceled.
Their books aren't being banned everywhere like everybody else, but their bands are being booked everywhere. Shoot, what was I gonna say? I don't remember what I was gonna say. It's been a pleasure, and I will be in touch. And again, thank you for rearranging your life to minimize the taxation on my life over the last.
Okay, well, I am glad for two things. One is that you're feeling better, and number two, after this conversation, we're friends for life. So it was great talking.
And in fact, if you come out to New York or you come out this way, let me know. If I don't know, it's more likely you come my direction than it is that I go out to you.
Do you go west often? You get out to LA?
Really? most of the time, like
Okay.
I'm a homebody, and
Yes.
the family that I have is in Tennessee, so it's sort of south. It's not really western, but every once
Yeah, so you kind of
while,
stay in that kind of pocket, right? Like the South is for me that's like the Pacific Northwest. It's like I'll
yeah.
go up there, but I don't go out east, right? So West and East is the thing
Do you ever
for
go to
sure.
Icon?
I have never been, but I'm gonna go because you said it.
I mean, you know what it is, right?
Yeah, isn't that this Illustrators Conference, right?
I was going to go this last summer, but because I was in Ireland, I couldn't go. But I think the next iteration, if I'm not going to Ireland, I'm going to Icon, and
Okay.
it would be fun to get a bunch of like kidlit, because I know it's general illustration, and I know there's kidlit people there, but it'd be fun to get a bunch of like kidlit people to go and sort of meet up.
Kidlit pub crawl. Kidlit pub crawl. It's gonna be your assignment. You're gonna create the Kidlit pub crawl. And we're all gonna do it
Crawl.
together.
It should be like something like sweet and innocent, like ice cream crawl.
Kidlit
Yeah.
milkshake crawl, but we'll flip a little bourbon in just to
Kidlit
grow it
Shirley
up.
Temple crawl. We're going to have a Shirley Temple at every single spot. And be like, we draw kids stuff. Can I have a Shirley Temple?
Yeah. I like this. I like this.
All right. But we will be in touch, and at some point we will meet up, and we will have a Shirley Temple together, and we will
I look forward
reminisce about bad movies and good movies and the era in which we grew up, and malls. And
it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I'll see you there.
Wilson leather jacket when I see you next.
I'll see you at Wilson. I'll see you at Wilson Leather.
All right. Have a good night.
All right. Peace out, man.
Bye.
Later.
All right. Oh, I went to a big shot. I feel like it just look how tiny. I don't like this angle. So again, tomorrow night, for anybody that's watching at this point, tomorrow night we have on Michael Slack, as we're doing a double feature. If people have things they want me to illustrate, i.e., an idea, you can throw it at me. I don't know whether I'll do it or not, but you can throw it at me. But tomorrow night, so I will not be having one on Thursday. Excuse me, because Thursday is a special day. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Halloween, but it's Halloween. And then I will be releasing probably on Thursday or on Friday the November lineup. So that'll be coming out. And I believe in November, don't tell anybody, but we're doing a game in Doodle, which is I have 3 other people on besides myself, and my wife hosts it, and she throws art challenges at us, and we have to perform in front of people with our art skills. And so that'll happen. We have the lineup for it, and I'll let you know in the thing, but it's going to be a fun one. And we have a spinny wheel that's going to make it even more chaotic. It'll make sense when we get there. Otherwise, I'll see you all tomorrow night. Good night, everybody.